Welcome to episode 26 of the Coast AFL Podcast for Different Players. This week, there is one more round to go until finals, and it's all coming down to this for a couple of teams. Top games, the Essendon Edge is officially dulled as Sydney pretty much stamped their minor premiership. Melbourne make a surprise jump against the Suns, but doesn't do anything for their finals chances, as they're pretty much ruled out. Collingwood Brisbane is an absolute nail-biter. St Kilda and Geelong is very, very surprising, especially for Geelong. And there's a ton of other games that we have to talk about. So please, come along with us and let's go through it. How are you doing, Mr. Cyric?
Not too bad, not too bad. A busy weekend. A bit of a sort of went out Saturday, felt a bit down on Sunday, but luckily there wasn't too much actual competition in the AFL going on Sunday. So yeah, like all in all, very interesting round of football. Sets up a big fun round. Personally going to the Fremantle Port game with my father. He's a Fremantle supporter. So glad to be making the trip down to Optus Sable for that. But also in between then, there will be a lot of football to be played and still a few positions up for grabs for certain teams.
There is, and we'll definitely talk about that as the episode goes on. For me, I am going to the Richmond Suns game at the MCG on Sunday. Dustin Martin's final farewell, even though he's not playing. It'll be interesting to see how the Suns perform on the MCG because they barely play at the MCG. But also, it'd be nice to, finish the season with a win. As much as it could, get in the way of having pick one.
Honestly, I mean, it really depends what Richmond want to do with pick one anyway. Because it could be a situation where it's as good as. We'll talk about it a bit later, but obviously, if North take a KP spot, and Richmond decide that the best KP wouldn't really fit them, they might take the best midfielder instead, and, maybe it's just a 1-on-1 situation, but again, we'll talk about that later. But, as you mentioned, technically, the spoon is still up for grabs, so even a tiny bit of meaningful game for those two clubs, depending on how you want to interpret that.
West Coast is officially out of the spoon bowl race, so it's up to North Melbourne and Richmond as to whether who's going to get pick one, which is going to be pretty interesting to watch, considering the two teams that they're up against.
Yeah, exactly. But again, we'll probably talk about that a tiny bit when we get to the Sunday games.
Absolutely. But for now, we are going to jump into a retiree segment, as we started last week, as, retirees are now starting to be announced throughout the year. Obviously, there are some players at the start of the year, like Angus Brayshaw and stuff, that announce their retirements early due to concussions and things like that. But for more recent retirees, we like to just highlight them a little bit and talk about what we remember of their careers. So this week is the only one that was actually announced that we didn't cover last week, and that's Dyson Heppell. Former Essendon captain, pretty big legend of the club, I would say.
Yeah, like as I said, it's sort of a weird retrospect for Heppell because obviously with such a passionate fan base like the Dons, his, I wouldn't say reputation, but his legacy year by year, fluctuated despite honestly how consistent he was as a player. Like the only thing I will say is that, he was in that 2010 draft with Andrew Gaff. It still boggles my mind that they're the same draft class. I think Gaff's so much older.
You think Heppell, Gaff's like 34, but he's not. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know. As I said, so he had a fantastic debut year. I don't think he won the Rising Star, but there was definitely talks that he would win a Brownlow in his career. He didn't quite get there, but what I will say is definitely as a midfielder, it's sort of hard because again, it's like one of those things where I think expectations sort of tainted what he was as a player, because what he was as a player was a midfielder who was he wasn't hard, not hard, but he wasn't a bull bowl winner, but he was hard enough to where he would win clearances when needed to. He was good enough by foot to make the right decision, move the ball forward, And like that combination made him really balanced. And unfortunately, I don't think Essendon actually ever did a good job in surrounding him with sort of the talent he needed, which, in my mind was like that heavy, big, bustling ball winner to just give him the ball to, let him distribute, where I think he was a slightly better player when he did have a bit more time and space.
Mhm.
Um, but as I said, his leadership was tremendous, highly rated internally as the captain, and led his club through some pretty down times. I think also one thing that's, underrated about his career or like overlooked is he had a whole year of his prime taken away from him,
Mhm.
being one of the 216 people, Essendon players that were involved in the drug scandals. He didn't have a bad year afterwards. Not like he dropped off, but eventually, yeah, as I said, later on, like, 2018, 19, his speed sort of fell off. I think he got an injury in 2020, or maybe that was 20. I can't remember. But, it was looking a bit, well, do we move on from Heppell? Is he really worth it? I think there were in a few trade rumors. And then Essendon made the most of him by moving on half back, where he could use his excellent ball movement to, again, help Essendon in another way. Because one thing you couldn't say about Heppell was that he was always trying to do his best to get the most out of his game to help the club.
Mhm.
Which again, like now in retrospect, as I said, you have those expectations away. Like as I said, he's now a much beloved player, and he's had a much beloved career at Essendon. I meant probably we'll talk about it a bit later, but Essendon fans sort of, were a bit upset that he wasn't picked this week. There's talks that a few Essendon fans didn't rock up because they were so upset about him not getting a final game. So, yeah, as I said, it is nice that his career finishes on a bit of a high note because, yeah, as I said, he's always been a hardworking player. I've
Mhm.
always rated him. I just think, if Essendon, and again, this is more my fault with Essendon's team management over the last 10 years,
Oh yeah.
he could have been part of probably a much better midfield than what he was, normally associated with.
But it's sometimes fate leads us in different directions. So his current statistics, in terms of like games and stuff, he finished if he doesn't play in round 24, he will finish his career with 252 games, 68 goals, and 71 Brownlow votes. Well, until we find out what the Brownlow tallies are at the end of the season. Um,
Mm.
Again, he was picked number 8 in the 2010 national draft. Born 14th of May 1992, debuted in 2011. His top honours, he made the All Australian team in 2014. He did win the Rising Star in 2011. The Crichton Medal in 2014, was the runner-up for the Crichton Medal in 2012 and 2018. Third place in the Crichton Medal for 13, 15, and 17. Essendon captain from 2017 to 2022. Essendon Life member in 2018. AFL Coaches Association Best Young Player of the Year award in 2012. AFL Players Association Best First Year Player in 2011. Member of the International Rules Series team in 2015. Uh, the Adam Ramanauskas Most Courageous Player Award in 2021. The Bruce Haymanson Best Clubman in 2013, 14, 15, and 17. The AFL Players Association 22 under 22 team in 2012, 13, and 14. And the John Kilby Trainers and Staff Award for 2018 and 2019. So whilst all of those are predominantly club-related accolades, it's still a pretty incredible list.
Yeah, no doubt. Like as I said, it's one of those careers where, yeah, he didn't quite get where some people thought he might have been going after his very strong debut years. Like he burst on the scene quite well. The only reason I didn't know if he won Rising Star is because I tend to forget those sort of things. But as I said, it's not like he ever got frustrated or, I don't think Heppell ever got him ahead of himself. And I think that like adds to why he was always able to adjust to whatever role he was really needed to. Like I think he of all the things I can say about him, I think his level-headedness and his, you know, added to, making him be such a well-rounded player. And
Hmm.
there is one stat I want to say, an oft-forgotten fact about Heppell, and I forgot of it until I got. He often pitched hit in the ruck early on in his career, and he had 47 hitouts in 2015.
Oh yeah, I just found
So
that stat as well. It's right there. That's
average
crazy.
2.1 in, and for a player that's like, what, I think he's like 185 centimeters.
And in that same year, he
Uh,
laid 105 tackles.
Oh yeah, that was always like part of his MO. He was a hard tackler. But yeah, 189 centimeters. Well, yeah, as I said, back in those days, he might have had a few more added to his total because he used to have the very puffy blonde
He had the
sort of
dreads.
haircut. Yeah, I think he did start off with dreads. It was
He didn't start off
dreads,
with dreads, but he
then
grew into them, and
unbound.
then yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. That was a trend.
he was a
That was
wild
like,
man.
oh yeah. Honestly, a few players from that era that sort of lost the dreadlocks, and I don't think that would like say that that's a reason. Like, I'm not saying it's a Samson situation, but
I was gonna go a
like,
bit of a throwback player with Ben Nason.
Ben Nason. I was gonna say Dowhouse.
Mm.
I think his best careers were with the with the locks. Yeah, I think even Grant Myers, didn't he used to have
Yeah, he started with dreads.
yeah. Granted, Myers probably played his best game
Nowadays.
year. So maybe this doesn't hold water, but yeah, I honestly in the early 2011 tees, 10 tees, yeah, one of the best haircuts in the competition.
Yeah,
Just a great player, great man, and swell looking dude.
absolutely. So speaking of Essendon, that is where we're heading for our first game. Friday night quote unquote blockbuster at Marvel Stadium. Um, yeah, as I said in our opening, the Essendon edge has officially been dulled. It was not a great performance from them. Swans kind of burst out of the gate pretty early, although they did ended up making it fairly even up until about halftime, and then the Swans just burst away. It was
Yeah.
it was tough to
Well,
watch.
I'll say yeah. It wasn't that this one so much best out early because Essendon were dominating the inside 50s. It's just to no avail. Like they were like both teams were like given their chances to produce offensively
Mm.
in each quarter. It's just as you said, like Sydney's defense was solid enough in that bit. Like they weren't letting like that dominance sort of impact how they look. And on the flip side, when Sydney got their control, well, as you can see by the final score when it comes up, yeah, it was as you said, no, it dulled. They just dulled Essendon. So
One thing I was surprised about is how quiet some of Sydney, even though Sydney won and won fairly convincingly, how quiet some of their forward line was up until like the fourth quarter. Like I hadn't seen anything from Joel Amati up until the fourth, for example.
yeah,
Like Essendon's defense for what it's worth for at least half the season, like is pretty good at shutting down one on ones.
uh, it depends which. I feel like you're right. There's always one play. It's how you rate it. Like there's like when you got Ben McKay, like you can normally shut down one of those players. But I think, as I said, it's more team defense
Mm,
with Essendon.
absolutely.
Um, we've gone how, I mean, obviously you got some of the things like, you hate to say it again, but Laverde, he's a bit turnover in the back half,
Hmm.
leads to a few easy interceptions, locking the ball inside 50. And as I said, one on one, they haven't had Ridley or the other player that they were trying to get in, which was Zach Reed, who
Yep.
I finally remember his name. Obviously still young, but he is sort of the future that they're leading towards. I think we'll see a different backline for Essendon next year. But unfortunately, it's lost them a fair few games and in a very close season. It might be one of the reasons why they face out of finals. Well, despite looking to at least make the finals, even then they weren't looking that, um, you know, like they were threatening in terms of you didn't want to play them because they were winning games, but like they weren't convincingly beating anyone.
Yeah, they overall they definitely had their issues in regards to they had some midfield structure issues early on. Thankfully they did actually solve some of that. But when one player in their midfield gets shut down, it's very noticeable, especially if it's Zach Merritt. And then
Yeah,
yeah, their back line is normally an issue. Although their forward line has had some pretty shocking games overall.
yeah. As I said, it's like it's as I said, that's probably the more frustrating thing. It's like the defense, at least you could see like personnel wise why that might be an issue for them.
Yeah, especially when they
And
lost
then
Ridley so often, because Ridley was massively important in some of their wins.
yeah, I even said like Redmond having a bit of an up and down. I think he
Hmm.
also missed a few games
Yeah, he did.
through injury. But then you got the forward line, which I think I said last week. It just always seems like the talls and the smalls can't function together, and it's just so baffling because there's no reason for it.
No, because yeah,
Like they've clearly got a
we've seen Stringer, we've seen Langford both pop off massively and like absolutely
yeah,
win games off of their own boots. But when they get shut down, it's like there's no forward line to exist.
exactly. And you got even like the younger ones like Matt Guelphy, Harrison Jones,
Mm.
and even Archie Perkins. Like I think he's been a bit better.
He's still
You know,
very
and
young
he's
though, so
also been
he's still
yeah,
learning a
he's
lot.
very young. And he's also like I think his focus is to work in towards midfield, but you know what I'm saying in terms of the role he's playing now,
Mm.
it still contributes. But yeah, as I said, it just never seems to click. I mean, they've only had their only multiple goal scorer for that game was Nick Martin. Again, fantastic.
I'm going to talk about him.
But you know, as I said, in terms of the point of Essendon and their, scoring, it's not a downside that he kicked 3 goals, obviously, but him being the only one to do so is a bit
It's a little bit concerning.
concerning.
So anyway, the scoreline for this game, as I probably should have mentioned earlier, was 8-11-59 to 15-8-98. In my opinion, honestly, it should have been only a 3-goal difference rather than the difference that it was. But you know how it is. Essendon cannot kick for the life of them sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, this pretty much consolidated the Swans' minor premiership. They still have one more game to actually win for that to actually happen because Port Adelaide are hot on their tail. But it's still pretty much theirs.
Yeah, again, it would have to take such a mammoth win. And again, when the final game's Fremantle, who should be fighting for them, you can't really expect like a 100-point win from them.
Absolutely
Like, as I
not.
said, because at that point, you're like, well, if there's any like injury risk or anything, you're going to be putting the queue in the rack, especially if that final spot is confirmed by then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
So I'll shout out a couple of players. Luke Parker, Swans veteran, probably one of my favorite Swans players overall. I've always loved watching him. He pretty much wound back the clock with his performance, kicking 3-1 from 15 disposals, 7 contested possessions, 6 marks, 4 inside 50s, 3 clearances, and 5 score involvements. So whilst low numbers around the ground, he had a massive impact up forward.
Yeah, exactly. Like he was quiet in the first when again Essendon had that territory dominance, but once they plugged him in the middle, as you said, it was like a throwback.
James Rowbottom was a press machine through halfback and into the midfield, finishing with 17 touches at 70.6% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 4 clearances, 5 score involvements, 5 tackles, and 28 pressure acts. And then Earl Golden, as he always does, except for when he gets shut down, he was hard running all night, collecting 25 disposals, 8 contested possessions, 6 marks, 8 inside 50s, 6 clearances, 4 goal assists, 7 score involvements, 19 pressure acts, and 534 meters gained.
I will say I found it a bit ironic how we like mentioned in the All Australian Errol Goulden being the best pure winger, and then he just like joins the centre bouncers randomly in this game.
Yeah,
63.
Something I've noticed is that they definitely love to swap him around with just
So with
anyone who's
with the
willing to play
midfield
wing.
struggling. Yeah, well, as I said, like it's almost like they forgot that rotation for a while. Because yeah, as I said, their midfield's struggling for a while. So yeah, as I said, the last few weeks is seen a few more, but still producing very well.
And it's not entirely due to their injuries, which granted they do have a few. But it's like the fact that the teams have figured them out. They know how to shut down their midfield. So if you're able to continue those rotations, like get Golden off the wing and play mid for a bit, even put Heaney on a wing for a
Yeah.
bit because they both have the same speed. Just mess up some of the rotations and it throws other teams off balance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as I said, personally, I'm a bit sick of hearing Sydney's injuries because it's really not
Oh,
much.
you're
Like
telling
even
me? Have you seen my
it's
list?
like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, it's like, Sydney injury, and then it's just like all this talk about how Carlton's so disappointing when they're like got
Well, they're not
15 out
disappointing
or
anymore
again.
after what they managed to pull off.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. I'm just talking about like media narrative.
Oh yeah, for
But yeah,
sure,
as I
sure.
said, it's just one of those things where yeah, as I said, heading into the finals now, at least Sydney's got a bit of form in that midfield. I'll still argue their defense is a bit, you know, it's still got a bit to go, but it wasn't really showing too much here just because Essendon just couldn't convert, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's an Essendon issue. That's not really a Sydney issue though.
yeah, exactly.
And then just for a couple of bright spots for Essendon, Nick Martin, as we mentioned before, he pretty much tried his heart out. Easily best on ground for the Bombers, finishing with 32 disposals at 87.5% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 6 intercept possessions, 3 inside 50s, 3 goals, 7 score involvements, 14 pressure acts, and 100% time on ground. He was pretty much doing everything that he could to win that game off his own boot. Fortunately, their
Yeah,
forward line just wasn't enough.
yeah, exactly. Like honestly, I would argue that he was the best player on ground. But again, it's up to players to decide that. It's
Yeah,
always hard when,
so it's not us to decide; it's for them to decide.
No, I was gonna say it's always hard when you got a player like Nick Martin that's like distributing inside. You know what I mean? If it was getting to a better forward line, I think he would have got more score involvements
Oh, for
that
sure.
game. But yeah, as I said, he just had to do it on his own, which he did. So
And
props to
then
him.
Jai Caldwell as well put up solid numbers. Been very very good in the midfield, and I hope they actually keep him there because I think he's very very comfortable in the middle alongside Zach Merritt. He finished with 31 disposals, 11 contested possessions, 7 marks, 6 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 5 tackles, 16 score involvements, and a 1-1 scoreline off his own boot as well. He was literally involved in almost every single score that Essendon produced.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. And to be honest, I agree with you. Like, I mean, again, if we do like a little team analysis at the end, we might go through a bit better. But like Essendon in their first half of the year, like it seemed like we were pretty set on their midfield, and then it's just sort of changed a bit. But as you say, Cardwell, I think is actually probably one of the defensive linchpins you can plan around. I think they need that pressure from him in the middle,
Absolutely.
but also around stoppage clearances away from the center. Because yeah, Essendon do struggle sometimes at leaking through stoppages. So yeah, we'll see next year what they roll out. Because yeah, there's been a lot of variability. Um, you know, which Essendon's put up a lot of variable performances, so maybe we shouldn't be that surprised. So.
Yeah, that's very very true. Again, we still have one more round to see where they're really going to end up, and that'll be somewhat of a good point of judgment as to what we'll see going into next season. But for now, let's jump over to the Saturday games, and I believe you have our first one.
Yes, yes. Well, up in Canberra, Canberra, no, Sydney. Um,
NG
yeah,
Stadium, not
up
the
at
other one.
NG Stadium. Yeah, 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 yeah. Honestly, absolutely terrific game to watch. It was a great offensive performance. GWS were looking to be their form best with controlling a lot of the possession, having some pretty nice goal kicking and great stoppage work. But Freo kept up with them in this entertaining contest. And arguably, you could say that two huge individual standout performances by Hogan and Daniel were the main difference maker in this contest. as Freo looked to have issues with the Giants' tolls early, with the first 3 goals being Hogan Cabman, poor young Draper, wasn't able to hold the likely Coleman medalist. They switched to Brennan Cox, and he just looked a bit slow for him. So Hogan absolutely tore through them. He kicked 6 goals for. That was like, one of the biggest difference makers. In terms of the pure contest, though, as I said, despite GWS having their fair share, I think Freo also brought it up to them with players like Brayshaw and Sarong fighting hard for both meterage and clearances. And, the impressive thing about Sarong is he had the hard Bedford tag, which has caused many of players' struggles.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to still produce for Freo and keep them in the game. As I said, it was a pretty even game for 3 quarters. It was a great forward half pressure by the Giants. They were able to create more intercepts. They applied fantastic tackling pressure and restricted the amount of otherwise good Freo ball movement, turning into more scoring shots as they would go on to win 15-11, 101 to 14-8, 92. And, it feels old bears repeating for Freo at the moment. They just can't. They're kind of stuck in the same game for a few weeks in a row now. In fact, they might have even. No, I don't think they had the lead at 3/4 time, but they were definitely in it.
I can
It was
quickly check that.
definitely. Yeah, it was a very respectable game at 3/4 time. I do think there was, a few differences between the two teams that led to the Giants deserving to win this game. But as I said, like as disappointed as the end of their season is going to be, as I said, it's not really due to lack of effort. I just think they're a tiny bit behind on some of the list, and that might be highlighted when I go through some of the individual efforts in a second.
To answer your question though, they were in front at halftime, but not at 3/4 time. It was all the Giants.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So again, Blazy, if I were to tell you that this game had one of the best individual games of the season, with a player kicking 6-4 with 9 marks, and with 2 players getting 40 plus disposals, you would be hard pressed not to assume that one of those players would be the owner of this elite performance. However, this wasn't the case because Brent Daniels, with just 29 disposals, had one of the most all-round small forward performances you can have in the game. His distribution was elite, going at 83% efficiency, gaining 504 meters, 7 clearances, generating 11 score involvements.
Mm-hmm.
His pressure was elite, with 26 pressure acts and 13 tackles, 4 of those being made inside 50. And his scoring was elite, with 3 goals won. And he joins Gary Ablett Jr. in being the only player to register a stat line of 25 disposals plus, 3 goals or more, and 13 tackles or more. I know it's a weird stat.
That is a weird stat, but that is still insane.
But it's like, when you think about why that stat exists, it was a stat to prove like why Gary Ablett Jr.
was one
like
of the greatest.
One of the best. Yeah, one of the best forward midfielders. Even maybe comparing it to his dad, even his dad was always considered the better forward, but that's not to say that Junior didn't have. But for someone like Brett Daniels, who let's just be honest, he doesn't have the skills of Gary Ablett Jr.
No,
he's smart, and he's had a year. We're pretty rough not to talk about him in the All-Australian thing. I think he's like the third best small forward in the league. It's just,
I was going to ask you that. Would you consider him the best small forward in the league? But clearly you don't. So who's your top 2?
Stengel and Moore.
Dylan Moore?
Yeah, Dylan Moore.
Yeah,
but again,
I see it.
Like this is one of those ones where in an individual game you push so much closer.
Yeah, for sure.
That because as I said, it was absolutely fantastic. Statistically, it's going to be the best game of the season. As I said, he's one of, I think, briefly looking, I think 5 players to get a champion data ranking of over 30 for a game. And I think it's the highest at 33. Again, that's just a number, but you know what I mean? It's just like we're talking about games that rival, a midfield Bond game, or that like extremely freak games by some of the ruckmen like De Koning or Gorn who can like rack up hit outs, sorry. So yeah, I just want to highlight how impactful that game was. So yeah, just give it a bit of time. Fantastic. But there were other people in this game and some terrific performances.
Surprisingly, there
Hogan
were.
Hogan scored 6-4. Strangely enough, only 3 of his marks came from inside 50. But yeah, as I said, he was just able to generate space from Cox, and he was absolutely fantastic on the ground as well as in the air. So the 240 getters, Brayshaw with 41, Green with 40 on the dot. Both played strong contested possessions respectively. Green probably had the slightly better game. He was at 75% efficiency, had 13 clearances, with 6 being center clearances, 7 inside 50s, 9 score assists, and 5 tackles. Brayshaw went at a slightly lesser 63%, but got 7 intercept possessions with 9 clearances, 7 score involvements, and 4 tackles. Both absolutely fantastic games. Like in most cases, like again, you would expect one of these two to be best on ground. Like one of them would be top 3, sure, but you know what I mean? It's just ridiculous individual performances this game. And as I said, it was more than just that. I thought Ash and Whitfield played very well off half back. Sam Taylor looks to be near his best. We've constantly sung his praises, but Darcy Jones is taking like an already lethal forward line and making it even better. Like probably akin to what I said a few weeks ago with Calamachi and Brisbane's forward line. You know what I mean? It's just like it's a bit different from what they already had. Darcy Jones and Archie are both like skill and ground level. But Darcy Jones also takes some really nice marks up forward. He's got some great leading patterns. So props to him. I already mentioned Sarong playing hard for the tag to break it. He had also 2 goals, which continued on from last week, so he can push up forward well. And I want to give a shout out to Liam Reedy and even Jackson as well. They should be commended as they restricted the impacts of Briggs as they drew levels in the clearance works, and they actually vastly outscored the Giants from stoppage. As I said, for a debutant, to be able to take one of the probably at least top 5 ruckmen in the league, especially one who's got as good as tap work as Briggs, absolutely fantastic there for the debutant. And yeah, that's pretty much wraps up the all the specific players I want to say. Again, I'll be repeating for Freo. While they're still missing Tracy, I think a lack of forward structure is still a bit to blame here. As despite Fremantle matching some of the freak top level performance for GWS, some of their fringier players didn't get the job done. And, a couple of them, it was all around the ground. It was like Draper, Johnson, Amos, and Banfield. Probably Amos just gets a pass, but again, Draper, Johnson, Banfield probably arguably had negative impact games. They just, as I said. And GWS just, again, on the flip side, just didn't really have any. Most of their players contributed in some sort of fashion. And in those close margins, sometimes that's all it takes. As I said, this should get better next year. Their depth will improve. But yeah, they'll be wishing for a bit more game experience. But as for GWS, arguably, statistic-wise, they're not like in the group of somewhere like, Western Bulldogs or Brisbane with their fantastic late form. Brisbane obviously dropping a couple, but you know what I mean? It's like for a while it was saying Western Bulldogs and Brisbane were like one of the best statistics teams despite not playing like it. And GWS is sort of the opposite. Like they've been winning games, they've looked fantastic, not always put up the best stats, but they're getting the job done. And if they can go to Mars Stadium and continue their form, they'll got a good chance for second place. Margin may matter, with only 2.5 separating them and Port.
Mhm.
But they've staying up a top 4 chance. With them, as I said, they'll be a threat to any team whose defense cannot dot marks inside 50 and struggle winning the ground ball. Like, either of those two are off, and Giants have an avenue of attack. And as I said, for Freo, fate's not in their own hands anymore. They need to win against Port, and they need one of the Bulldogs, Hawthorn, Carlton to make it. To lose to make it as well. Only one of which in the Bulldogs facing a top 4 team. Bulldogs and GWS are obviously playing, while the other two are facing bottom 5 teams.
Mm-hmm.
It's just gonna be tough for them.
Yeah, it is.
It's like, I don't know, like, it's sort of hard because, like, I live in around a bit more of the noise around Freo. There's always a bit of, I felt like there was a tiny bit more chatter of them being a premiership threat in the middle of the season than, not that they didn't deserve it, but you know what I mean? It's like, there was still some areas that they had problems with. So, like, I'll be interested to see your take on, like, how do you rate Freo, like, this season, and, like, is this loss just disappointment or, like, teething pains? How do you really see it? Because at the end of the year, it's going to be very similar to last year, where they won some really big games. They were very impressive. They won some home, some away. But yeah, the losses, and some of them being very unexpected, sort of, holding back from a possible finals campaign.
It's a good question, actually, because you've seen a lot more of Freo than I have, as we've very much well discussed over the season. I think they're a good team. I think they have a great core. Definitely the loss of Tracy these past couple of past game or two have definitely made a huge impact in their forward structure, and it probably has cost them this win specifically that they probably really needed. But also, they're still a young team for the most part. Are they definitely finals contenders? Yes. Maybe not this season now, overall. But they're definitely still missing at least one or two sort of key pieces that will push them easily into that top 4 sort of position, more definitively. Whether that's maybe a more a secondary key defender to be able to back up when Alex Pearce is out, for example, or just another strong key position forward to cover Tracy when Tracy's out. For an example, I know that's meant to be Amos. I know Jai's meant to be able to play that sort of role, but being able to at least have someone, whether that's a fringe player or whether it's someone who's just who's already in the team but is able to rotate into that position, just to back them up when the injury or out of form or whatever. Just have that sort of reliability would be good for them. Because again, Amos gets shut down way too easily, and I know he's still young, but it's something that he needs to try and learn how to better deal with, because it really does let his team down if he's not firing and Tracy's struggling.
Exactly. Well, it's not even Tracy struggling. It's just because they play such different positions. And it was actually interesting. I will say, there was a few moments where Amos pushed up and he actually looked okay. But he's just got to play as a deep forward, because that's what Freo need him to play. And as I said, in the start of the year, he wasn't playing that well, but he was taking a few marks and kicking, 1 or 2 goals per game and doing his job, where right now it's even just making contests and all that sort of thing. They just need a tiny bit more out of him, which again is insanely harsh for how young he is. Again, it's more just saying where Freo's at versus what I think of Amos as a player.
Yeah, absolutely. Then in terms of their midfield, I think their midfield is easily their best part. I've been very impressed with both Sarong, Young, Brayshaw, and even Nat Fyfe. With the new role that he's kind of been playing, that. And considering he still easily has at least another year, maybe 2, to possibly play, maybe possibly 2, but he can at least play 1 more year in the role.
It's one of those things where he can play another year, but it's also probably 1 injury.
If he gets 1 more nasty injury, he's easily done.
Yeah,
that's the reality of it. But if he's able to stay fit and in good form, like easily keep him in the role that he's playing. Keep him in this shutdown role that he's been learning because it's really, really beneficial to this team, especially when you have like your three new core midfielders around a pretty strong ruck as well. Just being able to just keep firing and firing and actually generate really strong score opportunities up forward.
Yeah. And I will say, like, again, the final point I want to say before we move on, you also got to recognize that Fremantle are currently 12-9-1 and sitting outside the top 8. Like, there's a good chance.
Yeah, that is a good point. Like, this season has been insanely tight.
Possibility that they could miss, because you say 12 wins makes finals most times.
But not this season.
Above that. Exactly. They could miss with 13-9-1. So, you know, that's just, like, that's made top 4 before. Like, not often.
But
oh, wait.
More recently it has, but not right now.
I think I think 14 is actually the least amount of wins for a top 4 spot. So I might be slightly wrong with that. I saw it before, but so that, again, 0.5 at least out of the lowest top 4 spot. But it just shows the variance of this season. But yeah, I said it might look to Fremantle are probably the unlucky team that's looking most likely not to make the 8.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do agree. But yeah, like if going into this offseason, if they're able to find another key position back or forward, that easily shores up their chances of a better chance of top 4 for next season, 100%.
Yeah.
Not to mention, we already know about trade rumors regarding like Baker and Bolton.
Yeah,
Richmond.
exactly.
That'll already bolster up their midfield.
A bit there. Yeah. But yeah, as I said, I think that wraps about that. We will go to another close game.
No, this game was not close. This was not close at all.
We're going to go Gold Coast Melbourne.
Yeah, we're going to Gold Coast Melbourne. This time's got completely embarrassed at home. A lot of people weren't actually expecting it because, again, it was a home game. We for all of this season, Suns up until this game, they'd only lost one other game at home, and that was against Brisbane for the Q Clash, which everyone kind of expected at that point because it was Brisbane. But no one was expecting Melbourne to come out the way that they did. Granted, it didn't do anything for Melbourne's season. Like, they've pretty much been ruled out of finals regardless of where they were going into for this game. But for them to try and at least have a positive end to their season after some off-field drama, or even more off-field drama, I should say, is pretty good for them, I think. Because when Melbourne come out to play, they come out to play. But when the Suns don't, it's pretty dreary for them. So the final scoreline was 99-63 to 18-9, 117, almost double, well, actually double. Goals kicked by the Demons. Jack Viney was easily best on ground. He wound back the clock with his performance, finishing with 30 disposals at 76.7% efficiency, 13 contested possessions, 5 marks, 4 inside 50s, 9 clearances, 10 score involvements, 10 tackles, 31 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, and a 2-1 scoreline off his own boot. I thought Daniel Turner had a great game up forward, despite being, like, again, one of those young players who's been massively able to step up this season. He kicked 4-2 from 11 disposals, 7 contested possessions, 5 marks, 7 score involvements, and 4 1%ers as well. And then Max Gawn, like, again, he's one of the best rucks in the competition. Jared Witts did his best, but just couldn't keep up with him. Max Gawn won the hitouts with 33, with 8 to advantage. And then 16 disposals, 11 contested possessions, 4 marks, 6 clearances, and 4 score involvements.
Yeah, no, I said, what you said. I think the biggest surprise out of this game was, again, Melbourne scoring 117. And, sometimes it just takes a big performance from maybe a young player or, just something you don't expect. And, I said, it was quite obvious, though, that Gold Coast couldn't defend some of the tolls. Disco Turner getting 4-2, Petty scoring 3 goals. I think Van Rooyen kicked a couple? 3.
I don't have it noted, but yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, as I said, like, And it's not like they have bad defenders down there. But obviously it wasn't quite to be. Yeah, it's just, again, late season Suns sort of meme overriding home team Suns. Um, you know, what can you do? It's
It's unfortunately for
something.
Melbourne, it's just too little, too late though.
Oh, it is, but as I said, I will applaud them for the effort, especially after last week's game. They take it up defensively to one of the best teams. Um, and just fall shy of a win. Obviously, it was very ugly, but to go, that didn't go our way. We're still in with a stupid chance, though. Let's go out there and try our best. And as I said, you gotta give them credit. They're missing players, but they put on a terrific performance. And again, the Suns, they're not missing players. They're trying to prove that again. Some of their prospective hype is actually going to be worth it and going to be sustainable. So, as I said, two young teams, I think this week are going to unfortunately add a few more question marks going into 2024. But
To to give the Suns just a little bit of leeway, like it is first year with a new coach. Like, granted, the whole hype about them this season was that, you could bring in a 3-time premiership coach. It's going to sort them out and they're going to make finals. That was the big hype. We all knew that wasn't actually
yeah,
going to happen, but
no, I
there was a
didn't.
brief chance.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's not so much that they're losing games or, I think it's just, again, it's more the way they go about it. Like, do I think this Suns team play different enough to like last year's Suns teams or like, because they've been playing a reasonably established core for a while. Like this isn't like the 2018 or
No,
19 Suns where
this is a more
you
recent
know
core that have been playing together for a while.
exactly. Whereas they were playing, again, some of the more fringier players, they would lose trades. They had some very strange trade-ins in that period where no, this is established. And, I said, I'm not saying Dim is at fault or whatever. I think, as I said, it's just what are the Suns players that are gonna stay and they're gonna build around because, as I said, it's not just that, it's also where they play them. Obviously, a lot of talk about players like Lukosius,
Mm-hmm.
very hyped, but didn't have quite his best season. I think it was dropped this week. But, as I said, how's he going to fit with Bailey Humphries? Do they stay together? Yada, yada, yada.
Mm.
As I said, they've got prospects up forward, but, Ben King and Ben Long are way too relied on to get most of their score. And, as I said, my opinions on the Gold Coast Suns
Yeah.
midfield. Matt Rao, as I said, fantastic player, easily who you build around. What do you do with Tuke Miller? Do you play him a bit more outside as he gets older? Or do you keep him in the midfield? Because Noah Anderson and Sam Flanders, they get possessions, but they don't lead to anything.
Yeah, they're not
And,
the exact same. They don't play the exact same way that Trick Miller plays, which is what the team needs.
yeah, exactly. And as I said, it's just, one of those things where it's not that I don't rate both of those players. Like, I would argue, like, in terms of, like, all Australian conversations, they don't deserve to be in there because of that fact, but they're still really good players.
Absolutely.
It's just, again, how do you format that? And, we'll talk about it a bit later, but, yeah, as I said, it's just, I think this season's ending up to be way more disappointing than some of the optimism that was presented, especially after that win against Geelong in Darwin, where you thought that a corner might have been turned. Yeah, that's about it.
But I mean, to be fair, going back to that game, like Geelong were coming from a very cold patch in Geelong up to warm Queensland temperatures, which the Suns are used to. So that game itself wasn't that hard to guess.
Yeah, I
Weather
know,
played a
but you
big
know what I
factor in
mean.
that performance.
It's like you can you can say why that was such a big margin or whatever, but like as I said, like it's one of those things where it's like you you don't want to be too reductive and like give too much emphasis on things, but I think you can go the other way too. Like this was the Suns team with form. You want to see more.
And Geelong were also in
To
that patch where they weren't really sure of themselves either.
Yeah. Well, and as I said, you want to see them continue, but being so stop-start with a win-loss, win-loss, as I said, it adds to the culture and it will hurt them next year. Like, no doubt. Like, you might see them being a team that, again, they might get more wins closer to finals, but again, you lose games against teams around you that you should be winning. And, that might keep them out next year. Like, we all thought that it might have been a 2-year path for finals, but I'm getting more and more skeptical.
Especially considering how tight this season has been. You can only imagine how tight next season's going to be in the meantime.
Yeah, as I said, a year's a long time in football, but yeah, as I said, with a competition as it is, you want to try to prime yourself for the best football you can, and that's consistent football.
Absolutely. So in terms of like Suns players that I thought put up decent performances, Sam Flanders, we did mention him just before. He did put up impressive numbers. 28 disposals, 7 contested possessions, 7 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 2 goal assists, 11 score involvements, 17 pressure acts, and 2 goals. And then Charlie Ballard, I thought was very good in defense. 11 touches at 90.9% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 9 intercepts, 6 marks, and 8 1%ers. Unfortunately, there was an injury for this match. Tom Sparrow injured his ankle. Likely won't be playing next week for Melbourne because I believe it was a pretty. It wasn't. I wouldn't say severe, but it wasn't a big injury enough because it wasn't just a roll to where he definitely won't play out the last game of the season. Which is rough. Like you don't want to see that at all, especially when he's actually been very good for their midfield. But
yeah, exactly. Like they were looking at this 2 games to see if Tom Sparrow would stay in the rotation. Obviously, assuming Petrarca comes back, as I said, more question marks. I don't think we'll feed into that until maybe after the season and we talk more about trades. But as I said, either to fill in that loss, possible incoming loss, or just adding a small rotation. But yeah, as I said, he's been an underrated player, but someone you can easily look over, but he always provides a bit of hard work and effort.
Yep, absolutely agreed. All right, shall we move on to your next game?
Yeah, it depends how you want to do it, because obviously...
I'm happy to just alternate, because I know we'll have to do a Sunday game in between a Saturday game, so I'm fine with just doing that.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll go to the Showdown, where absolutely nothing controversial happened, and good times were had by all.
A very friendly Showdown match this season.
Yeah. Despite the final margin suggesting this game wasn't super interesting, it'll go down as an infamous Showdown. It will be remembered for one incident. We'll talk about it a bit. But unfortunately, it will take away from like the high pressure finals like play. Again, both teams will get passages of control, and both defenses were standing pretty strong by the quick entries that were generated by turnover. It would still produce a lot of scoring shots. The problem is Adelaide in the first quarter couldn't convert theirs, and Port in the second quarter did the same. So it felt like there was a lot of wasted momentum, but you could see these were like 2 teams gunning at each other. Again, there was a bit of early heat. There was a bit of not huge scuffles, but there were any after the contest, you would have a friendly conversation after each one. But yeah, the thing that also struck out early was the umpiring. It was a very weirdly umpired game. The Port crowd was already wind up by the Rochelle comments, talking about the lack of dental presence in their crowd.
More of a thing that more Victorian teams ask Collingwood supporters.
Yeah, well, as I said, I thought it was pretty funny. And, as I said, especially since Rochelle did have some good moments in the first half. I guess his back half wasn't that great, but, as I said, I thought it was actually pretty funny. Like, as I said, Rochelle pointed his teeth after he scored his first goals. There were people in the crowd, with lolly fake teeth. a few chucked them on field. I'm not for chucking things, but if it's going to be something, lolly teeth, that's okay.
That's comedic
And yeah,
effect right there.
yeah, exactly. It's not going to hurt someone, and it's a reference to a specific thing. And someone even brought some false teeth, and was chomping him towards Rochelle, when he went out of the race. So good scenes there. Unfortunately, we got to talk about it. In the third quarter, Adelaide were up by, I think, 10 points. Um, they had a spoil in their defensive half. Mark Keane belted the ball forward. Isaac Rankin collected it, looked to take off, but unfortunately, Dan Houston was running into him. He bumped him. I will say it was like 95% on the chest and, a tiny bit of chin contact. Again, from the replay, it's hard to tell, but everything went south from there. Rankin would, because front on bumps are so hard to do, your natural reaction is to flinch upwards, which Dan Houston unfortunately did, and he left the ground. So it was a recipe for disaster. Rankin toppled quickly. He hit his head from the recoil onto the ground, went into fencing position, and yeah, it was pretty ugly. Um, there was a lot of mixed reaction from the crowd. No one knew what to make of it. Especially since because the umpire in real time, and I'll defend this, like, again, there wasn't technically it wasn't easy to see high contact there. There probably was a tiny bit. It should have been a free kick to Rankin, but you can see why they didn't call it. So they thought that Jason Horne-Francis got a free kick for something off the ball. No, it's just there wasn't a free kick paid for it. But yeah, it's an ugly hit. It'll get 4 to 6 weeks. Like, it's just 3 weeks minimum. You leave the ground, you're responsible for your opponent. So, it's a hit that's caused head contact. He's left the ground. That's 3 weeks minimum. The fact that he chose to bump instead of tackle when he had enough time not to do so, like, that'll be either 1 week or 2. And then, as I said, it was just the worst possible outcome. As I said, I felt sick seeing it. Like, I've only seen 2 situations live where I've seen a player go into fencing response. And if you don't know what that is, it's when your muscle seize after a concussive hit.
Mm-hmm.
It's involuntary action. One of which was in American football. So it's the first time I've seen it in the AFL, live at the very least. So yeah, as I said, it was very ugly. Unfortunately, in such a high pressure game, I think sort of the pressure, like, Adelaide still wanted to respond. But you know what I mean? It's like they got a bit careless, gave away a few free kicks. They had some shocking umpiring in this, like, second half as well. So it sort of swings and roundabouts in that regard. Their pressure also dropped off a tiny bit. The tone sort of changed in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I said, Port were just able to take advantage of that because they were fighting for a top 4 spot. And yeah, they'll go on to win 11-14, 80 to 8-10, 58. Again, another game where defenses were being, remarkably good. Their mark inside 50 count for both teams, it was 6-5.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I said, both will hold their head high there. But yeah, as I said, it's just one of those things where you almost want a few more individual performances or just something to take away from that individual moment, but it really wasn't there.
One
Like,
thing
that's just going to be
I
the main thing.
I was watching a bit of this game alongside St Kilda and Geelong, which we will talk about soon. And one thing I noticed specifically about this game is that Phil Thorpe was playing a lot further up the ground rather than deep forward, where they probably needed him a lot more.
Oh, yeah, as I said, it's sort of hard because, like, he was pushing up because he was being held so well inside forward. And I will say, like, he led marks inside 50. Like, he had some great hands moments.
But he
But
had
you know
some
what I mean?
great
It's
hands just overall.
Yeah, but it was just a match where, like, any forward would have to work up above the ground. Like, it was same with Charlie Dixon.
Mm.
Like, he was the only real tall that Port were playing because of their outs. and he just couldn't take a mark because he was held so tightly. Normally he's good for taking at least 1 or 2 in the contested mark situation. But yeah, I think Keane was on him, and despite Keane having a few turnovers, in terms of one-on-one defense, he was absolutely fantastic. So shout out to him. I guess this leads into the individual performance, and the 42 possession games of Zach Butters, the highest ever in the Showdown, would easily win him the Showdown medal. And that came with 20 contested possessions, 12 ground ball gets, 10 clearances, 10 score involvements, and 1 goal too. And, as I said, one of 2 players that were able to create his own space, which were invaluable, considering the absolute pressure that was in this match. I will give a shout out to Isaac Rankin because he was the other player. He was almost untackleable. And, I know that sounds a bit cruel irony in a way, considering how he went out the game. But players just couldn't get a hand on him when he had it. He wasn't that clean with his disposal, but at that time, for half a game, he kicked 2 goals, and he was very scrappy. The big bodies, as you can imagine, they had some good games. Wines and Dawson were fantastic. Wines had 26 disposals, 8 tackles, 22 pressure acts, and 10 ground ball gets. And Jordan Dawson had 26 disposals, 11 tackles, and 24 pressure acts with 8 ground ball gets. Jordan Sweet impressed again. And it wasn't just his hit outs to advantage and 5 clearances from 8 possessions, but the fact he did it after a tough shoulder knock, which caused him to go in for restrapping. Jace Burgoyne, I will say, on the wing was great with 22 disposals at 82% efficiency, 7 marks and a goal from the wing, and it was speed and class in the greasy conditions. That makes me want to highlight his performance. And while there was no forward line players that were really firing, I will want to say that Port had the advantage in forward 50 pressure, despite pressure being generally pretty high. And Rioli and surprisingly Radicallia led that charge, with Rats getting 4 tackles and Rioli getting 3 tackles inside 50. And despite the only goals coming from those 2 being Rioli late, as I said, it was enough to keep that functioning in a pretty dour defensive night. And yeah, Charlie Dixon, Keane had his number, but he was solid backing up the ruck too. So, while a lot of players in the forward line were taken away just in general the entire night, I think Port got a tiny bit more just from other efforts from those players. So yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of the actual game itself. With the surprise results, this win streak from Port has resulted in a top 4 lock, with it likely coming down to the Freo match to determine if Port get to play from 2nd or 3rd, likely against GWS, still possibility for the Cats, and even unlikely Brisbane. Obviously we've talked about the tribunal. Dan Houston goes straight there. We don't know what he's going to get, but honestly, most people I think are pretty strong, spot on. 4 to 5 to me seems both likely and fair. 6 would be harsh, but you could see it, and 3 would be ridiculously light, but technically you could argue just purely on action is in the realms, but
I think 4 is a solid
others.
number that they should go with. We'll talk about it in a bit more anyway, but
yeah, exactly.
I'd say 4 is probably the best outcome for both sides.
I will say the best thing about this tribunal will be, trying to separate the ugly aftermath, because, as I said, there was a lot of confusion on the grounds. There were a few boos going off when Isaac Rankin was carded. And, it was very hard to say whether it was, just because, the Adelaide supporters didn't know what was going on and were booing the fact that Jason Horne-Francis got the ball, or booing Houston himself.
Booing.
Or, look, I'm going to say, just in a crowd of 45,000 people that were there.
I don't know how much the crowd holds. I can have a look.
Yeah, there's going to be some dumbass Port supporters that would have booed them. If you do that, you're a grub. I'm hoping that number was in the thousands. Well, not that. You know what I mean?
Okay, I can tell you now that the crowd for the Showdown was 52,459.
Yeah, exactly. So you know what I mean? It's just like you don't want it to be defined by that, but obviously it's like the double-edged sword of a showdown or a rivalry being that great. It's that some people like use that as a disconnect to be vile towards other people.
Mm.
So again, any Port supporters that did such a thing are a grub, or even any Adelaide supporters that personally attacked anyone who was just minding their own business. You never want to see that. You just you know if you see that hit and your main takeaway is that
Someone's
you
a
hope
filthy
that
player.
you want to see that Rankin gets back healthy as fast as possible, and B, Houston getting some form of
Punishment for it.
reprimand.
Yeah.
Exactly, because as I said, you can argue all you like how deliberate or intentional it was. I think you're hard pressed to say it was like really malicious, but it definitely had the worst outcome. And as the AFL's told you, if you leave the ground, you're responsible for the player you hit.
Yep.
Especially if you elect to bump, which he's done. So he has to bear that responsibility. And, as I said, it's unfortunate because, I said, otherwise there was a lot of heat in this game, and it was a lot of heat that I thought was natural. But yeah, as I said, it just ended up sour. And I'll finally talk about Adelaide in terms of this. Like, they're a lot better than the bottom 4 team that they're locked to be. They'll be marginally disappointed with the fade out, considering. But again, when push comes to shove, there's still a lot of things going right. And again, they'll be their forward line, again, they didn't fire, but I think it's just Port's
Port's defensive
defense
efforts were really, really good.
Yeah, and especially in this last half of the season, like I think most teams will be struggling to kick more than 70 against them unless something changes. Um, and yeah, as I said, yeah, the only thing to say about Adelaide is really, you know, uh, I think it's like turnovers and varied performance for some of their older and younger players. Like, and the direction they'll choose to go for next year. Again, we'll talk about it a bit later.
Mhm.
But it's like, do they again focus on their high flying offense that got them the wins last year, or work on building this young Crow backline that has produced this year? And again, had a very solid night out. So and with that, I'm talking about players like Keane, Worrell, Murray,
Mhm.
and Jordan Butts. That's it. He's out injured at the moment, but
Yes, he is out injured,
he's
but
in the
he's
mix.
very key
So
to that back line for sure.
yeah, exactly. So a lot of talent there. It will be interesting to see the makeup of Crow's 2025, but you would expect it's some sort of mix between that. And if they can get a midfield that either A, prevents entries coming in easily through turnovers, or B, generates enough entries the other way, yeah, they'll be pushing for finals, I would imagine, next year.
Could not that it's very likely, but could they coax Petrarca out of Victoria?
Who knows? I mean,
Because like he's
look,
the sort of player that they could actually really use in that midfield. Granted, most teams could use Petrarca in their midfield, but
oh yeah,
like
exactly.
he's the sort of player that would probably be fit exactly what they're after, just to solidify
Uh,
that one hole.
yeah, I guess. Like, I guess it's also how you like, again, I wouldn't say it's like exactly needed, but as I said, it would give them flexibility. Like I don't know if it's Petrarca, but they have a few midfielders that can play different positions, but don't quite excel in the middle. Like you've got your obvious ones, Jordan Dawson. I mean, hell,
Obviously,
even he's not even the best in the middle, but he's
Dawson,
still that's what
Crouch, Rankin, like
uh
they have
yeah, Crouch.
good players in the
Well,
mid.
Rankin's flexible. You
Oh
know what I
yeah,
mean?
Rankin's like a mid forward.
Like you want him to be flexible. Like you can play him like 80% set of bounces if that's what you want for the week.
Mm.
But again, like, you got players like Sam Berry, which, flirt week in, week out how much his role is important. There's another one that's shortly inside.
But
Um
the point is though that I'm making.
Saligo.
Yes, Liga.
Saligo, yeah.
That's right. But like the point I'm making with Petrarca is that if you have a dedicated on-baller who's like pretty much all the time at the centre bounce, then you can have that flexibility from Rankin, and you're able to free up Crouch a bit more as well, be able to have that extra running carry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, as I said, the danger obviously being is that the way Petrarca's situation is, it comes down to a trade. So
Pretty much,
it's
because
either they give
he
up.
is signed for a
You know,
couple more years that he screwed himself over.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't think Adelaide's going to give any important pieces, which means that they'll be giving up their first round draft pick to get him. Plus,
Yeah, like
oh, no,
if Adelaide was someone in the race for Petrarca, if that was going to happen, they would have to give up a lot for him, and I don't
yeah, it
think they
would be
want to.
like, yeah, like you would be giving up a player like Sam Berry to get Petrarca. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, he's someone who's solid enough. Maybe not laying your best, but combine that with a first round pick. Um, so I doubt that it would happen with Adelaide, but I mean, it's going to be some team that can conjure up something.
I mean,
But yeah, I just don't think they have the capital.
have you seen the picks that Richmond will have for the first round? I'm
Yeah, well, I
just
said,
saying.
yeah, well, it could be a multi-pick deal.
I
So,
I mean, I wouldn't say no, honestly. If we were to go in and just say, like, I definitely agree. Granted, I shouldn't be talking about this now, but
yeah.
I think we should go hard in the draft, especially with Tassie coming in. But I'm also not
Hmm.
going to say no if we were to take Petrarca out of Melbourne.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like maybe you could trade it for a couple of later round picks. You can still be flexible.
Hmm.
Like, you don't have to be straight, 1-on-1, couple of draft picks, or a fringe player or whatever. But yeah, as I said, honestly, is the fact is Petrarca's going to have multiple deals,
Absolutely.
and one team's going to pay over, and I don't think that team should be Adelaide.
No, probably won't.
I think they've got enough core. But, as you mentioned, inside midfielder could be someone here they target in the off season. So
And especially
we'll see.
if especially with the situation with Tex as well. Like, is he going to retire? Is he going to go to another club? What's his situation? They could use
Yeah.
another key forward as well.
Yeah, but you can see the transition there more. Like they could run Phil Thorpe, Fogarty for a year.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
It's just about
so as I
consistency
said,
from Fogs, because like Philpop's great. Like Philpop's already proven he can handle it, but it's just about the consistency with their other players.
yeah, well, as I said, I think Fogarty's done enough in the back half of the year, but as I said, it's a lot different when you're the main target. Like even in this game, albeit under immense defensive pressure, as I said, Fogarty wasn't quite taking like he only had 2 marks for the game. So you probably want that a bit more imposedness, but if you can get that mark, he's generally good for a shot. So I think it's something to work around.
Yeah,
It's just how they position it.
yeah, I agree with that. All right, let's move on to the MCG with a Saturday twilight blockbuster between
Mm-hmm.
Collingwood and Brisbane. This literally went down to the wire. Um, although, from my point of view, I think Brisbane choked late in that final term. They pretty much gave Collingwood 3 or 4 free goals just right off the bat, and it pretty much cost them the entire game. The margin ended up down to a 1 point deficit at 11-13-79 to 11-12-78. It would have been really, really funny if this was actually a draw, because it would have been what Collingwood's third draw of the season or something like that.
Yeah, it would have been.
That's crazy. I don't think in recent memory that's actually happened.
I can't think of a time where a team scored 3 draws in a year, but it might have happened.
I definitely not recently. Maybe
Uh,
past 15 years
well,
it's possibly
GWS
happened.
got 2 in a row, I remember.
Yeah, I remember that one
Um,
too. But I don't know
but yeah,
three
I
in a
don't think they got
season.
another. No.
Obviously we're not counting extra time from finals and stuff like that, because that's an entirely different kettle of fish. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, Brisbane coughed up, pretty much just coughed up. This last the pretty much coughed up the game in that last term. To their credit though, they played a great game up to that point. They were very, very strong defensively, very strong offensively. But Collingwood just ended up having the better legs in the end. Shout out to Steel Sidebottom, absolute pressure machine this game. 26 disposals, 8 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 5 marks, 6 clearances, 5 score involvements, 8 tackles, and 21 pressure acts. Darcy Cameron had an even contest in the ruck for the most part against Oscar McInerney, but was just managed to just be better around the ground. He finished with 30 hitouts, 10 to advantage, and 15 disposals, 73.3% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 5 marks, 6 clearances, 5 score involvements, 15 pressure strikes, and a goal as well. And then I'm going to talk about a Dacos, but not the one you expect. I'm going to talk about Josh Dacos, who's been, he's always putting up great numbers alongside his brother, but I think he's been slightly less underrated this season. But this game, he definitely stood out a lot more. He ran hard pretty much all evening, collecting 26 touches from 76.9% efficiency, 9 marks, 6 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 17 pressure strikes, and 502 meters gained. Overall, pretty solid performance from both teams. This win gives Collingwood the very, very slightest of margins for a premiership defense. Statistically, it's possible, but it's very, very improbable that it's going to happen due to them having to depend on other teams. And for Brisbane, it pretty much just coughed up their chances. Like, plain and simple. Will they still
top
play?
4? Yeah.
Yeah, like their top 4 chances are pretty much slim to none. Same with Geelong, which I will talk about soon as well. Although it's still very, very up in the air what the top 4 lock is actually going to look like, but it's very, very slim
Brisbane,
margins
technically,
for Brisbane.
There is a scenario where Brisbane miss out on the 8.
That's probably
again,
not going to happen, but it's a very
possible.
slim possibility.
I mean, we're talking about Fremantle beating Port by like 300 points. But,
true.
as I said, that's just like, the way the season is this year.
The only way that's going to happen is if Port decide to play their under-18s.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Look, I want Freo to be competitive. I want Port to win. But yeah, I said it's just like some of the statistic scenarios. Like, I know the top 8's almost set now, despite it being, looking to be a few teams in it. But, some of the scenarios between top 4 and, or even just getting a home final, which is going to be so important, just shows how ridiculously important this game will be for ladder positions, probably 3 to 9, really.
Yeah. It's
yeah.
that close.
Oh, sorry,
still.
2 to 9.
It's literally that close. We have teams now that are definitely locked for finals, but whether their placements are still not locked. Not even top spot is still technically locked. It's crazy how flexible the top 8 still is.
Again, Adelaide, I think Adelaide will have to beat Sydney for 500 points. For,
if they want a chance. But...
Yeah. Yeah. But in terms of the game itself, obviously I didn't see much of this one. I caught the end of it, I think. I can't even remember how it ended. I must admit, I must have been
pretty much halfway through the fourth quarter. Brisbane just stopped, and Collingwood just went bang, bang, bang.
Exactly. But yeah, as I said, it's a tricky one because it's hard to see. I mean, okay, obviously it's easy to see where Brisbane have lost a bit, and as I said, it's being that high stoppage scoring team, defending from possession. The flip side of that is when your opponent gets time with the ball, you can get a lot of damage done that way, which Collingwood did. At least from what I saw in the stats wise, they lost their possession count, but only by 20.
Yeah.
We're losing some of the major categories, but with their intercept generation, able to counter attack with Brisbane just, as you put it, mucking around with the ball, whether that be goal scoring or some of their inside 50s attempts. Eventually that's going to catch up to you. And for the last couple of weeks, it has for Brisbane.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate loss, as was the one against GWS. But granted, GWS is just a better team overall, turns out. That as someone who was at that game, that is very surprising to me.
Yeah.
But Brisbane did actually have some pretty solid upside despite the loss, because again, it was only a 1-point deficit. And surprisingly, Joe Danaher was actually one of those. He very much rose to the occasion. He kicked 4-2 from 16 touches, 6 contested possessions, 5 marks, 10 score involvements, 2 1%ers, 100% time on ground. And I don't know if this is actually a typo or not, but apparently he had 500 meters gained with the ball, which doesn't feel
Oh,
right, but it also feels kind of right at the same time. I think he was just playing further up the ground.
yeah, no, I said, marking wing option when he pushes up, so
It,
I can see
it
it.
just doesn't
I
feel
mean,
right for him to run more than like any of the average midfielders. Like it just doesn't seem like a Joe Danaher thing to do.
he runs quite a lot, and plus, uh, meters gained is also kick length as well.
Oh,
So
true. Yeah, it is. So yeah, that does definitely does contribute when you're a key forward who can kick massive distances.
yeah, exactly.
Uh,
I don't know if it counts for goal shooting though. I've never actually
no,
figured that
no,
out.
I don't think it does. I think it's purely just
Yeah,
ball traversal.
yeah, which is silly to me because it's like you kick a 50-meter goal, you've gained that 50. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Um,
It's a
doesn't
weird
matter.
statistic, but
Yeah,
it does also count. Just traversal on foot or traversal through kicks. Um,
yeah, exactly.
I think it
Anyway,
also counts
stat page.
traversal via handballs as well, because I think it goes
Yeah,
towards.
yeah, it
I
would.
think it's a mix with your
Yeah,
disposal efficiency.
yeah, and if you kick it backwards, it's negative. Yeah, it's a very pure stat.
Yeah,
Um,
it pretty much it's either forward or nothing essentially.
yeah,
And then Hugh McCluggage, I thought he gave it his all. Pretty much left everything out on the field. 26 disposals, 16 contested possessions, 3 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 7 score involvements, 5 tackles, and 25 pressure acts. It's the performance you normally expect from him, and he's always very well respected within that club as well for his performances. So credit to him for giving it his all. It's just unfortunate that he couldn't get the job done. And then, unfortunately, there was one injury during this game. Jared Berry did a hamstring. He won't be playing next week, which is unfortunate. And definitely won't. He might make it back for finals. I don't know how bad the hamstring was. Um, so we shall see how that goes. Overall, um, very, very slim chances for Collingwood, as we mentioned, for them to have a premiership defense. Um, I assume for Collingwood fans, you hope that it happens. It's very improbable that it happens, and your season is pretty much over, to be honest.
yeah,
However, I think there's still a lot of upside to what they showed in this second half of the season. Um, and whilst unfortunately, Premiership hangover has happened a lot recently to a lot of teams. Again, Richmond 2020 to 2021, Geelong 2022 to 2023. Um, but at least you showed some very, very massive promise in the second half. You bled a lot of young talent during the second half performances as well. Some that you can definitely cultivate going into next season. And in terms of Brisbane's chances, you want to hope that they are able to somehow win close games and stop not fade out in the final moments when they need to actually be on.
yeah, because like they were losing close games to start the season. Obviously the first one with Carlton. I think Melbourne beat them by a slim margin when both of those teams were struggling. Um, yeah, it might have even been because I think there was a Collingwood Brisbane match earlier in the
And
year
they
too.
lost to Geelong as well at home too by a close margin. I remember because it was a game in the
Yeah,
wet.
that's right. That was a shootout too. So, as I said, like it's weird because like Brisbane at that point we're looking not to even make finals
Mm.
and then that huge momentum. But there's still points in the season where they'll look back and I feel like they've let one slip, but you just can't take away from how much effort it was to get back into the season. Um, and as for Collingwood, as I said, we've mentioned it. They're well structured when they're going. They've just had parts of this season, partially through injury, but also partially not, where different lines have dropped off, mainly defense and forward line.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as I said, that's just in a tight season. We talk about consistency all the time, and they've just not been able to string as many games together in their good form, um, despite having some wins against good teams. Like obviously they spanked Port, and they've had some other good games against top 4 teams, but yeah, they'll look to probably bow out of this one.
Yeah, pretty much. Um, Look, to Brisbane's credit, especially coming off of where they started by losing Keaton Coleman, like in round one, or was it round
Yeah.
zero? But they lost him very, very early. And it's just, it had a dramatic effect on this first half of the season. But the way that they've bounced back is incredible.
Yeah, good teams find players though. And as I said, they've been able to generate a bit of run in other areas. Still mainly forward, Kyle Lohman we've talked about.
Oh, yeah, what a revelation
I've got,
for them going into the later half of this
yeah.
season.
Well, talking about Reville, I know it's not in favour, but some of the things he's been able to do, and you know what I mean. It's not like direct 1-on-1 because obviously it's not from halfback, but it's able to still generate pace in the game, which they've been able to sort of recreate, not perfectly, but yeah, as I said, they've been able to do enough with some of the fringe players,
And not to
whilst at the
mention,
same time,
a debutant like Logan Morris that they brought in. Like, remember his
oh
story
yeah,
from having to play VFL and then immediately coming in to play an AFL game and played
yeah,
like 8 quarters in a row. It was rough for him, but
yeah,
like
exactly.
he's been a revelation for their forward line as well. It's amazing what you can
Yeah,
find.
as I said, it's definitely never really their forward line. It's just getting into that's being the I won't say knock on them this year, but you know, um it's one of the biggest determiners on whether because I don't think they quite have as much pressure as some of the forward half teams
Mm.
in the league. It's just their ability to convert, not truly, but in terms of scoring, like inside 50, is absolutely fantastic. They've got a lot of talent in there. Um, it's just, yeah, as a matter, A, kicking truly, and B, from that, can turning, well, it's basically just creating momentum because obviously if you kick a goal and you're a good centre bounce team, what happens once you kick that goal? You get a chance to set up in your best position in the ground.
Yeah,
You kick it
exactly right.
behind, you have to run and defend. So, yeah, that'll be a bit of a determination. We'll see how they go in finals, but again, for them, they're a lot scarier if they have that game in hand to just bust. So yeah, so it's a huge knock to their finals campaign early. It's not like they're not a threat, but the way they play, you definitely want to have that game in hand. But at the same time, I would not be rolling them out. I wouldn't want to be facing in the first round in Brisbane. I wouldn't want to be a team that's scared of them knocking you out in straight sets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, we'll see what they can do. But yeah, definitely very disappointing, despite still being a great team.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Shall we move on? Let's just skip St Kilda Geelong for the moment. Let's head over to
Yeah,
the Western Bulldogs and North Melbourne.
yeah, this one's going to be a short one. Um, we all know the Bulldogs against mediocre defenses and mediocre for middle, obviously. Yeah. Midfield against mediocre defenses, the generation they get from the midfield, they're able to decimate teams, more than decimate, because yeah, it was much higher than the 10th. It was the doggies doubling the inside 50 count and trebling the scoring shots. And yeah, as I said, it was lack of resistance that would make this game go from disappointing to dismal, as they were lucky not to have the worst effort of the round, the Kangaroos. Um, Despite not playing a recognised ruckman or recording a single hit out to advantage, the Roos midfield will drag going over the clearance work as they got beaten 17-8 in the centre clearances and only managed to draw even in stoppage clearances. So the Bulldogs were rucking Sam Darcy and who was it?
Were they rotating
Mine's
Norton,
blank.
maybe?
Uh,
Were him and Norton
I
just
don't think it
rotating rock
was.
forward?
No, it was Rory Lobb.
Oh, yeah, that makes
Sam
sense.
Darcy Lobb and one by Buku Kamas. Um,
Sure,
so
why not?
shout out to him. Would love to see that cheeky 1 or 2 hit out game. And yeah, the attempts to stop the Bulldog forward line were hampered earlier with an injury to Charlie Comben. And Sam Darcy took plenty of advantage of this, as despite already kicking a couple of goals on minute at that point, he would really cash in with 10 scoring shots and 7 goal one with 15 score involvements. outscoring all of North by a point. So, as I said, his individual 7-1 was
And
better
just
than
just
the.
to just to interject on that 7-1, have you been told about the little kind of score, little score, like the little statistic that he beat by kicking 7-1?
Oh, he beat North 6-6.
No, Luke Darcy, his father, his best amount of goals
Oh,
in a game is only 6. So Sam
oh,
Darcy beat his
right.
own father in a statistic.
Yeah, no, that's quite amazing. And look, I mean, it's coming not with an asterisk on it, but because Darcy would have played against some pretty dreadful teams in his time.
Hmm.
But you know what I mean. It's just sometimes when you have the moments, you got to take it. And for him to do it so young in his career, some massive props to him. Because as I said, if it wasn't for suspension, he would be up there in Rising Star.
Hmm.
We know all the controversy for that. But honestly, if I was to give it to Darcy or Reed, like ignoring what do
WA
you call it?
bias.
No, ignoring the suspensions. I
Oh,
would
yeah.
actually give it to Darcy over Reed
Yeah, so would I.
this year.
Overall, better season.
Um, but anyway, that's neither here or there. Look, the Bulldogs midfield, it was standard. Bond, Richards, Trelaw, and Libba all stepped up. Libba 10 clearances, which was 4 over the next best. Trelaw with 33 disposals, 7 tackles, 5 intercepts, and 7 score involvements.
Mhm.
Bont with 29 disposals, 14 contested possessions, 13 ground ball gets, 6 clearances, and 7 score involvements. Richards with 2 goals, 9 score involvements, 22 possessions, and 9 clearances. The Bulldogs machine's very hard to stop once it's in getting going, and yeah, they got going. Joel Freer is one of the early contenders for the best value picks in this last year's draft, along with Lawson, who you might be talking about soon.
Yes.
He had 29 disposals and 13 marks with 90% efficiency, 7 intercepts, and 7 score involvements, with 2 goals assists as he was running unchecked. Caleb Daniels also appreciated being in the mix again, with finals probably leaning for the doggies. 25 disposals at 96% efficiency. Cherry was all dressed up and no one to hit it to, as I mentioned before, but clearly was the Roos' best player, as it was hard to rate any of the Roos, as their possessions were all just a bit junk from the bit I watched. As mentioned earlier, I did have a bit of a not migraine, a bit of nausea, a bit of a headache, so I didn't actually watch all of it. But yeah, as I said, from what I watched, yeah, it was just movement leading to nothing. I will say I thought Bailey Scott tried hard to get involved.
Mhm.
From what I watched, I think he ended up scoring 2 goals or something. But yeah, as I said, he was very involved in some of the forward movement. And yeah, the Mammoth win adds to their percentage. It didn't really matter for the Dogs because their percentage was already quite high because, as I said, they feast on teams. So yeah, it's just a final matchup against GWS to, avoid an unlikely 8 miss, but more importantly, try and get that home final and avoid possibly either facing Brisbane or Hawthorn in that first week of finals.
I was talking about this with a workmate today, because he's a Hawthorn supporter. If it is a doggies Hawthorn elimination final, is it going to be played at Marvel or is it going to be played at the MCG? Because
Well, it's interesting
Hawthorn is a
because,
co-tenant of Marvel Stadium, but
yeah,
big finals games are normally played at the biggest venue, which is the MCG.
I mean, there was a lot of talk before this about their contractual obligations of playing at least one game, if possible, at the MCG. So basically, if there's a Melbourne team in, they have to play a game at the MCG, which is absolutely ridiculous.
I
But
do agree.
you
As
know,
much as I love the MCG, I do agree in this case.
yeah. So again, the worst of that being Geelong, who have no affiliations to the MCG. Well, not no, but you know what I mean. Um, but
If
yeah, but as I said, so they
until Geelong build a ground that can hold 100,000 people, they have to use the MCG.
I know, but it's one of those things where, yeah, as I said, it's a weird quirk of AFL football. But yeah, so you would imagine, yeah, it would probably go to the elimination final, having a game at the G. Geelong are unlikely to get that early Etihad game anyway. They would need a lot to go their way. But yeah, it's just likely to be at the G for that. And with that, again, if you can avoid that happening, either Western Bulldogs getting to 4th and maybe getting the game at Etihad, or, as I said, and facing 8th, of course. But either way, as I said, it's just, they'll want to get 8th because, as I said, 8th is going to be huge.
Mm-hmm.
We know it's either going to be likely Carlton or Fremantle. Carlton are injured to buggery. Fremantle, technically, it being harsh on them, it's the team you want to face of all the finals contenders.
Yeah,
especially
statistically,
away from home.
I'd say that's probable.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So, 5, even though it's unlikely historically that they make it to the grand final, it's a big step getting that to make that run. And, the step between 5 making grand final and 6 is going to be huge.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
All right. If we're all wrapped up there, shall we jump back over to Saturday night?
Yeah, give me some good games, please.
Oh, okay. Well, it depends on how you look at it as whether this was a good game or not. If you're a St Kilda supporter or just a fan of good football, then this was absolutely a good game for you. Because St Kilda and Geelong at Marvel Stadium was not a game that people were really expecting to go the way that it did. With 6 unanswered goals from St Kilda in the third term, with 7 goals overall in that quarter to Geelong. I believe Geelong only kicked 1 in that third quarter. Pretty much saw the Saints take control of the entire game and shut down the Cats' chances at top 4. Granted, there is still a slim margin for the Cats to solidify a top 4 chance. They've already solidified their finals chances. They're not knocked out of the top 8, as far as I'm aware. But if they want top 4, it is a very, very slim margin now.
Yeah, the lowest they can go is 8th, sorry.
Yeah, they officially cannot be knocked out, which is credit to them. But also, this loss does not do them any favors.
No.
So the scoreline overall was 16-11-107 to 14-5-89, with Jack Steele being absolutely dominant in the midfield. 27 disposals at 81.5% efficiency, 13 contested possessions, 10 marks, 4 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 10 score involvements, 10 tackles, or as what we like to call the quadruple double. 31 pressure acts, a 2-1 scoreline, and 401 meters gained. Would you like to explain to the fans, in case they're not aware, what we consider the quadruple double?
So it's obviously based off the basketball stat, being based off offensive generating stats, being possessions, tackles, possessions, tackles,
score involvements.
Oh yeah, no, it's not. It's you have to get over 10 in kicks and handballs, I think. So it's preventing it but just being a handball thing. So yeah, he scored over 10 kicks, 10 handballs, 10 tackles, and maybe it is score involvements.
It's either score involvements or marks, but either way, it's over 10.
Oh no, it is marks. Yeah, it's marks. So yeah, honestly, again, it's not a stat that translates to AFL football, but it's one that's rare to come across. I saw the list of players to have done it. I think it's only 11. Sorry, no, it's the 10th player. Sorry, to do it.
How fitting.
So yeah, again, he's one of the best possession getters for the Saints. We said it all year. I wouldn't quite say it's his best year, but it's definitely been a solid trying year.
I think last season was probably one of his best years, but he's definitely stepped up a lot when the Saints have needed him to.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, basically, we've said all year, Saints midfield's been pretty dire. He's been doing it all on his own. Little support. If a few players that are developing, we'll talk about maybe your Hunter Clarks or actually that's dire. That's all I can think about at the moment. But again, not a good midfield team.
Granted, like he has had some backup from his halfback.
Rowan Marshall.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
about to talk
Rowan
about
Marshall
Marshall,
being the right
but like he
helps.
also has had
Yeah.
some backup from his back line, like Sinclair, Kel Wilkie, Zach Jones. You know, there have been some players from the halfback that have stepped up as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And
But yeah, as
I
I
will
said,
talk about that in a moment. But yeah, Rowan Marshall is where I'm going. This is
yeah.
anything you want to add there before I keep going?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, in terms of individual performances, like, absolutely, should be celebrated. That little performance.
Absolutely. So yeah, Rowan Marshall absolutely dominant around the ground and including the ruck. He finished with 21 hitouts with 6 to advantage and 28 disposals, 17 contested possessions, 7 marks, 6 inside 50s, 10 clearances, 6 score involvements, and 541 meters gained. Massive for a ruckman. Pretty much did all the work himself. Like, he didn't even need a midfield half the time. He was doing his own work.
Yeah.
And then Cal Wilkie was so important to their backline. He was absolutely incredible. 28 touches at 89.3% efficiency, 13 intercept possessions, 15 marks, 6 score involvements, 2 1%ers, 426 meters gained, and 100% time on ground. He was so important. And there was just no way that they could get through that defense.
Yeah, because I see he was on Ollie Henry. Ollie Henry kicked a goal. I don't know whether it was on him at the time, but had little to no impact. And it's one of those damaging things. Like, we've seen so many halfbacks not only generate intercepts, provide pressure, take marks, but also just shut down their opponents. And we talked about in the All Australian, like, how unlucky for such a good season to maybe not even be like the top 3 best defenders in the league. But there's no doubt how skilled he is and how important he is for what is a top 5 defense in the league.
Yeah, it's crazy that for a team that has been sitting, or that has somehow been sitting like bottom 6, bottom 5 for a solid half of the season, has had such an incredible defense overall.
Well, Melbourne's in the same boat. Like, they're still, I don't think they're quite top 5. Maybe they're 6th or something, but it's still like significant. Like, it's in the realm of good defenses. And obviously, probably that last match helped a lot more. So
yeah, and it's like we do look at St Kilda's season overall. Yeah, they've had some pretty bad games. Like, there was that game against the Doggies, or not even like 2 months back, that they just got absolutely destroyed in. But like, when you look at just their core structure of their defense, it is pretty fascinating to watch, especially when you look at Wilkie, Sinclair, Jones. They're pretty important.
I think the weirdest thing is just like their big offensive games has happened against, decent teams. Like, they beat Sydney, scored nearly 100. Maybe it was 100.
I think that was 100 actually.
Yeah, it might have been.
That wasn't that long ago.
They scored 100 against Brisbane and only just narrowly missed out on the win. And I think there's another weird game where they won by a fair bit. But,
I think it was against Essendon as well as this game against Geelong.
Yeah. Essendon. Yeah, they flogged Essendon. Again, not the best defensive team, but still, like, they control the midfield where the Saints sort of suck. So yeah, as I said, there'll be a lot to look at over the season, how to develop this Saints team going forward. Because you can't exactly say they're a hit or miss team when they've like been renowned bad, like their forward line. Like, we don't need to talk about it too much. Like,
no, we're all aware that, like, granted, Max King hasn't been firing effectively, but he's injured now anyway. So it's about letting those other players.
They've been having to find outside sources to it's not like they have key forward spares. Like, they're playing Caminiti, Cooper Sharman. They're playing fairly tall, who's sort of come in.
Who's actually had a pretty good second half.
Yeah, I will say, like, absolutely. And considering, Machida Owens, you thought he might be the player to develop. He really hasn't.
He had a good first half. Second half, not so much.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, the fact that they're still able to at least find some semblance of players and not just hope on some of the potential form is at least signs. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then like you've got Tim Membry back down there, back up front as well. He's been able to
Mm.
perform when they've definitely needed him to. So there's definitely some pieces that they're able to look at and take positives out of, despite where they're currently sitting on the ladder.
Yeah, exactly. As I said, they still to me feel like more bottom four than Adelaide, but you can't deny that they've had some great wins.
Oh
So
yeah, for sure. Especially against teams that probably underestimated them a little bit.
yeah, no, exactly. So
But
yeah,
to
well,
Geelong's credit, there are some players obviously that stood up. Lawson Humphreys, as you mentioned before, he was electric. Like the fact that he was one of the last players picked in last year's draft is insane because he's that good.
yeah,
He's developed incredibly well, incredibly quickly too. 24 disposals at 91.7% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 9 intercepts, 7 marks, 4 score involvements, and 15 pressure acts. And then Jack Bowes, who I really like to watch. He's great on the wing and through the middle as well. 31 disposals, 9 contested possessions, 4 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 5 score involvements, 18 pressure acts, and 782 meters gained, which I believe is one of the highest of the round as well.
uh, yeah, yes, yes. Pip Zach Butters by 40.
Oh yeah, there you go. And then to unfortunately end this game on a slightly dour note, there were a couple of injuries for St Kilda. Bradley Hill had a little bit of a back issue. I don't know if he'll be playing next week. I don't know how bad it is. And Anthony Caminiti dislocated his shoulder. Uh, yeah, thankfully, it was only a dislocation as far as I'm aware, but I don't know if he's playing next week either. Fair chance they will probably just rest them both, and so they can go into the preseason a lot more healthy. But yeah, that
Yeah, with Brad Hill's impact at his age, yeah,
better
you
to
definitely
just
want to be wooling
rest him.
him.
Mm.
Exactly.
And yeah, I believe
But
that is it. If you got anything else to say,
yeah, no, not really. Like as I said, honestly, it's so weird. Like the Cats, they've been so impressive for periods, and then they'll just like randomly do something that make you think that they're just going to go out in straight sets or something. But they've still got a lot of good players, and again, they've had some decent games against top teams. So yeah, they might just scrape into the top four, but they definitely deserve to be in the mix. It's just some of these matches have been a bit disappointing, but on the flip side, they beat Freo away from home the week before. So, as I said, comes and goes a bit. All teams are like that this year. So,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, is what it is.
All right, let's jump over to the last Sunday game, being the West Coast v Carl with an against an undermanned forward line of Carlton.
Yeah, look, this is going to be a bit of a Sunday roast because, you would be forgiven if you thought that the Eagles were one with injuries in their forward line in this matchup. It is, yeah, it took half a quarter for Waterman to kick their first 2 goals and 3 quarters of the game to kick their fourth. Well, sorry, 3 quarters later, they kicked their fourth.
Mhm.
It was zero effort, zero intensity to try and pick the bones of Carlton and their diminished squad. The midfield got absolutely swallowed by the admittedly healthy Carlton mids. They weren't missing anything in the midfield, and we know how dangerous they could be. But one man leading, basically telling the Blue Baggers that he is going to do all in his power to get the Blues in the top 8. That is Patrick Cripps. He was absolutely fantastic.
I'm gonna interject just for a second. If this performance does not win him the Brownlow, I don't know what will. I'll be honest. As much as I think the Bont should win it, I think this performance alone just kind of solidified his hand.
Yeah, well, it's one of those games where, like, you honestly, you know, if you could, like, have, like, every umpire just nominate a 4-vote game, just, like, for their best individual performance, like, this would be near one of them. Like,
Absolutely.
actually, because it was a bit scrappy, Optus Stadium was hosting a rugby game the match before the when Springboks, I think,
We have a
thrashed
friend
up
who actually
Australia.
went to that game.
Yeah, we do actually. It would have been yeah, South African friend if
Yes, it is the South
yeah.
African friend.
um so yeah, they were very happy. And I must admit as bad as I thought the turf was going to rock up, it was all right. I don't think there was any injuries because of the turf. But it was still a dour game because there was so much rain. And yeah, Cripps was able to not only get 35 possessions, he was able to go 80% efficiency, rack up 10 clearances, 12 score involvements. And yeah, he every good Carlton score involvement, which, you know, with that depleted forward line, was they had to work hard to get. But, you know, as I said, it all seemed to be generated by Cripps. So by far and best player on the ground. But we should say some surprisingly great performances. Brody Kemp, backman for Carlton, if you don't know him, he doubled his total goals for his career with a 4-goal performance, 4 marks inside 50, whilst Owies led well. He was sort of playing that small forward that still led up. He got 3 goals of his own, where Kennedy, he was more of that distributing half forward. He was great, had 9 score involvements, 2 goals, 1. And so, you know, with all said and done with this makeshift Carlton forward line, it was really good. Like, not efficient, and you would expect that. But, you know, they made the most. And despite only having 8 more, despite only losing the inside 50 count by 8, the Eagles, despite having only more 8 inside 50s more than Carlton, basically, yeah, Carlton won the marks inside 50 in this matchup, you know, and we're talking about like Oscar Allen, Jake Waterman, and Jack Darling versus Owies, Kemp, Kennedy. Like, this was bad. And, you know, and that point where I make by the inside 50s is it wasn't like a huge disparity either. So, you know, it's really discouraging. You know, but credit to Carlton's defense because they were absolutely fantastic. Wiedering shut down Allen, took a game high 12 intercepts and 5 intercept marks. So, you know, he won both of those statistical categories. Young took Darling completely out of it. And also, if it wasn't for 2 strong marking contests, Waterman didn't really have much of. Oh, sorry, Waterman didn't really get a chance to do much more than his 2 goals, being on the other McGovern, being what is he? Mitch McGovern.
Yes.
He was actually the better defender of the night, in my opinion. Because yeah, as I said, it was hard to argue if anyone at the Eagles had a good game. Their 2 stat leaders were McGovern and Yo, but both comprehensively got beaten by their opponents in Kemp and Cripps. And yeah, I will also say to have 2 efforts like this in the season for the Eagles, happening after a big win, the other one being the Adelaide performance where they got absolutely smashed after their upset win against Melbourne, is a real shame. And I would put this effort as the worst Eagles loss of the year. And it is their 7th time this year scoring under 40 points, which is more than last year where they had 5 performances. And yeah, there'll be metrics which I'll be discussing at the end of the year wrap up that will put a tentative pause on the claim that overall they were a better team this year than last year. Honestly, I don't actually believe that, but it is a bit damning to see, you know, when you compare it to the year where they were basically missing half their team most of the year due to injury. As for Carlton, they got their percentage back, which they lost last week, and have a chance to get into the 8, controlling their own destiny if they beat a scrappy St Kilda. And yeah, the only other downside is injuries to Zach Williams. Again, I think he did a hamstring. I'll confirm that in a second. And yeah, Corey Durden, who found himself back into the side, suffered a shoulder dislocation as well. Yeah, Zach Williams is actually a back.
Okay.
So again, whether that's just wrapping him in cotton wool or whether it's going to be someone for next week, it's going to be interesting to see. I think they'll only possibly get Mackay next week, if I remember the injury list.
I can
The
take a look at
others
the
were
injury
Tom
list
Moore.
whilst we're talking about it.
But yeah, as I said, it's limited the players are getting back, so they don't want to lose more. So yeah, it might be slim pickings for them. But they've at least shown the amount of spirit and effort, um, with their season on the line. And honestly, it might be a controversial opinion, but I believe wholeheartedly that Carlton deserve to be in the finals more than Freo. I think they've been the better team all year. I think they've had a harder run and a lot more injuries. And despite this, they've managed a reasonable year. And yeah, as I said, I'm not saying Freo don't deserve to be in there, but you know what I mean? It's just in terms of all-rounded performances, like even maybe you could say like Hawthorn, Western Bulldogs, and Fremantle, maybe in their own tier of teams that have struggled at times, but still put in some pretty good performances. But yeah, I think Carlton are pretty unlucky to be in 8th at the moment. I don't think they'll cause damage in the finals just because they can't get that top 4 spot. And, as I said, the teams, they won't have much home ground advantage, even if they do. With obviously the 3 Victorian teams making up the bottom of the 8. And, they're not going to face Fremantle. Unless they both make the grand final, which would be ridiculous.
That would be crazy.
Yeah. So, not much really more to say. Like, absolutely putrid effort by the Eagles. The lack of run, the lack of effort by most of them. Like, it was a few. It was weird because there was a few high tackle counts like Elliot Yeo and Jamie Cripps. But you know what I mean? They were like it were tackles that needed to be made because there were lack of efforts in other areas. Rather than what I would say is like, just high pressure. And, as I said, I know it was 4-10, but still 34 points. Quite abysmal, again, considering the talent they still have in that forward line. And yeah, they're just like, they're going to be really harsh on who survives this year. Because, last year they needed to keep a lot more players because of depth. And obviously, like, they're not going to draft exactly who they need to still. They'll be in the midpoint. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this team, considering some of the efforts that have popped up, if some of these players, like,
you don't
I don't want to
want
say
some
like
of these players to leave, but the reality of it is that some players are gonna want to leave, and they're not exactly a destination club right now, like Freo is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Freo's not really a destination club because they're just in the West. But,
But Freo is
they're the better
more
of
attractive
the 2 teams
team
in the state.
Yeah.
And when you're a 2-team state, it generally the team on top attracts players. But, as I said, Petricelli, he's had some great games, but his worst is contributing to some of these losses. Do you persist with both the Edwards? Like Gibney, you would think stays in the squad, but like, where do you put? Look, I said True, I thought was coming into it, and then he gets absolutely beaten this week. So there's the other one that's sometimes in the mix. Honestly, I can't remember.
I don't know, to be honest. I don't have that much experience with the Eagles this season.
Yeah, it's just it's so hard when you have that, in your lower end, and then you still got to wonder, like, your top end aren't getting it done consistently. Like, it's really just Yo, McGovern, and probably Kelly, and that's it. Williams puts in a lot of effort, but he's playing too young.
Yeah.
And then you got like Ryan, who, some of his efforts in that last quarter, they were dreadful. And in a team that needs forward pressure, you know what I mean? Like, I know he takes fantastic marks, and I know, but if that's not translating to direct score, like, you have to find a way to involve yourself in the game, and it was just not it for him. So, yeah, they need a complete revamp in some areas, and this should have been a week where they're like g- continuing that positive momentum of the last 2 weeks. But
But
as I
yeah,
said,
they
it's
just
just causing us
fell
to
completely flat.
reassess. Yeah, like honestly, it was bad.
You mentioned
I don't want to
before
go too harsh.
about Carlton's injury list. I have brought it
Yeah.
up. The update for this was last Tuesday because it's updates every Tuesday. Um,
Mhm.
but if I'm looking at this correctly, they could possibly pretty much get their entire forward line back. Um, so
Really?
Kerno is 1 to 2 weeks. So like they could either come back this week or they'll come back for
Yeah.
finals, provided Carlton make finals. Um, so Kerno 1 to 2 weeks. Sam Durden is 1 to 3 weeks, but I doubt he'll be back this week anyway. Caleb
Yeah.
Marchbank 1 to 2 weeks. He had concussion, so if these protocols are over, he'll be back. He'll be in the team this week. Jack Martin 1 to 2 weeks. Mackay 1 to 2 weeks. Hudson O'Keefe, but I think he's a VFL player primarily at the moment. 1 to 2 weeks. I think he's a French player. And then Adam Sard is also 1 to 2 weeks. There's entire possibility they could be like near full strength, quote
Yeah.
unquote, for this last game, which they will definitely need if they want to make top 8. But with the performance that they
Yeah.
just put up, without without Kerno and without Mackay, there is still an entire chance that they make finals without them and they just let them rest.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just like when I mentioned that middle period where Carlton also faced that injury patch, and I said that they were pretty impressive despite dropping a few games. Like they lost to Port by a fraction. They had another loss against, I think maybe Geelong or something like that.
Mm.
But you know what I mean? It was just like, yeah, they, dropped a few games in a row. But you could see why that was happening. There was a few injuries. But the fact that they were brave and experimenting back then, I think has helped in this little bit of the season. And I think, if Victorian fans can be fickle. There would have been a few people saying, "Oh, if Carlton miss the 8, chuck Voss in the hot seat." But honestly, I think they've actually been
I think they've been pretty
coached.
resilient considering the injuries that have suddenly come upon them.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna say like this is the best coach season they've had in probably 10 years, and I would say even more so than last year where they made that run, because it happened after such a slow start.
Mm.
So. Um, yeah, no, so props to them. And, as I said, it was very impressive by Carlton. There's probably more performances that I could highlight. It's just, yeah, this match wasn't that exciting. Petnet, Hewitt, Hollands, all fantastic. And that's both Hollands.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, who else can I remember? Yeah, I said the entire backline for Carlton. um, oh yeah, and yeah, Jackson Binns. I thought him coming in. He's sort of a fan favorite for Carlton that lives on the fringe. It's only his second game, but he's been doing good things in the VFL, and so yeah, he gets this moment. And Ashton Moyer, if you haven't seen his goal, soccer. I don't think it was his first kick, but it was his first goal. Absolutely beautiful one to get you off it. It was the biggest highlight of the game. Um, but yeah, check out that goal if you haven't. Pretty beautiful.
Absolutely. So yeah, I don't think we really need to touch any more on the Eagles. But in terms of Carlton, do you want to hope that I think even if they don't make finals, if they do get eliminated out of the top 8 in this last round, I think they, considering the cards that they have been dealt, in the patches where they have had good form otherwise, I think they can still be pretty happy with their performances. Obviously, they still have a lot to learn from, as do most teams in their situation, or as most teams overall. But I think they have the right amount of pieces, to be able to again play for top 4, play for finals. But if it doesn't happen this season, that's perfectly okay. I
I would
great
say perfectly okay because
like
Cornrow
obviously,
and
they want to they want to make finals after the games that they have
yeah,
played and the efforts that they have put through. Like it's realistically you want it to be finals or nothing. But
yeah,
when you get given a hand, like, all of a sudden, as they have been over the past 2 weeks, like if you
yeah.
finish ninth at the very least, that's not a bad thing overall.
No, I said I still think it's bad, but you know what I mean? It's just like,
It's not the
you
worst.
know,
It's not the worst of the worst of
I still think
outcomes.
overall Carlton are trending upwards. It's just, as I said at the start of the season, they're one of the toughest draws, and they had injuries as well. Like,
Mhm.
again, Steven Silvani, unavailable for the whole season.
That's his father,
Already that's Steven. Sorry. Um, Jack
Jack
Silvani away
Silvani.
for the whole season. Like, that injury alone is probably like bigger than
Jack
all of
Silvani, Sam
Sydney's.
Doherty.
Yeah,
They've had
exactly.
a couple of rough goes at it.
Saar going in and out. The other one.
They missed Sam
Um,
Walsh for the first half of the season.
yeah, Williams going in and out. So, yeah, as I said, but yeah, it'll still be disappointing because you got your best player. You're the prime of Cornrow and Mackay being tall forwards. You never want to take that for granted
Hmm.
because we've seen some longevity forwards. I don't think Carly Cherno will be one of those with his prior injury history. So, yeah, just get the most out of them while they're firing. Hopefully, it'll be next year. But yeah, a bit of a tough position, but they're definitely holding their head up high.
Absolutely, and there is still, again, they still have every chance of 100% making finals in this last round. It's just going to come
Yeah,
down to not just them. They need some teams to sway some directions to be able to solidify that
yeah,
top eight
absolutely.
chance. All right,
Yeah,
let's jump over to the final game that we haven't talked about, which is also not a very exciting game. And I just realized that I did not write down the final scores for it, so let me bring that up really, really quick. Um, Again, it wasn't a very impressive game from us, which I guess isn't really all that exciting or all that expected, um, because we were playing an informed Hawthorn.
yeah. It was Hawthorn 131 to Richmond 68.
Yes, correct, 10-8-68.
1917 to 10-8.
Thank you. I wanted to write it down in my documents just so I had it. So again, Hawthorn take another step firmly into September by demolishing Richmond, who, again, a beautiful game on the MCG. It's the second time that Hawthorn have demolished us, the last game being Dustin Martin's 300th. Um, Again, Hawthorn are in brilliant form. You can't fault them at all. However, a very early injury to Will Day, which he got sent to hospital for scans right off the bat, was very concerning for them. It allowed Richmond to push back in to have a chance and slim the margin down to only 30 points during the second and third quarters. But then Hawthorn just put their foot down, had a complete reset, and just wipe us off the board, which everyone expected at the end of the day. Um, Jack Gunston was easily one of the most highlight players of the game. He pretty much wound back the clock in his performance, kicking 5 goals from 17 disposals at 88.2% efficiency, 9 marks, 5 inside 50s, 9 score involvements, and 11 pressure acts as well. Jai Newcomb was lively all over the ground, especially in the middle, taking over Will Day's role when he went out. He finished with 33 touches at 81.8% efficiency, 15 contested possessions, 7 marks, 7 inside 50s, 9 clearances, 2 goal assists, 15 score involvements, 5 tackles, 18 pressure acts, and a 1-1 scoreline off his own boot as well. And then Blake Hardwick, who I have mentioned throughout the season, who is pretty much a swingman for them. He can play forward, he can play back. It's very important. It's very good for them to have when they don't have their key forwards like firing. Like when Dylan Moore had a little bit of a rough patch early in the season, they sprung Hardwick forward and it really helped them. But overall, like he's back in defense, he's very solid in defense, and he pretty much just wiped down Richmond's entire forward line. He collected 22 disposals at 86.4% efficiency, 11 contested possessions, 11 intercept possessions, 5 score involvements, 9 pressure acts, and 5 1%ers. So again, pretty much an expected performance from Hawthorn. Currently sitting in 7th position on the ladder, and they could very much possibly take a top 6, top 5 spot if given the opportunity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, as I said, I had that one blip last week against the Bulldogs. I can't remember.
I can't remember who they were playing, but
Um,
yeah,
yeah, no, as I said, no, that's not last week. Last week was Carlton.
that's
Um,
right.
yeah, the week before that, against GWS. So, you know, if you can even call that a blip. But otherwise, yeah, one of the most formed teams coming into it, coming from absolutely nowhere in the season. Their form's fantastic, and yeah, their dominance. It's sort of hard because it's so weird for a team to dominate so much from the outside as much as the inside. Um, Especially if that team's like on a burst, because you control a lot of the game from center bounce and stoppages, and but as I said, it's that diversity of forward line attack that makes them so threatening. Makes it very hard to defend as well when you don't know where the ball's coming in from. And yeah, as I said, it's not just the insides, as you mentioned, like Jai Newcomb. I don't think you mentioned Warpedo, but
No, but I was actually going to
he's the
mention
other
that.
one.
Like, there are so many players that I could have talked about other than Jai Newcomb. Like, I could have talked about James Warple. Massimo D'Ambrosio had another great game.
Yeah, I was going to say Massimo from the outside, and
And then
Dylan
Warple on
Moore
the
when he
inside.
pushes up.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're a huge threat. Look, I'm gonna.
And like, not to mention, like, even Luke Bruce had a pretty solid game considering he came in the first quarter because Will Day was immediately subbed out.
Yeah, well, if you're in the finals, as I said, like obviously most teams they put that young sub, but they can honestly run Gunston or Bruce. If they're having a pinch, bring them on. If they're having trouble scoring, maybe Cal Shadia gets shut down or something like that.
Yeah, there has been a couple
Again,
of weeks where that has happened, where they've subbed Cal Shadir out because he's been a bit quiet, and they put whoever their sub is. I think it's been Bruce mostly.
yeah, because they're missing Mitch Lewis. He's like their other tall forward, so they're doing it with a one tall forward line, which is very rare. For them to consistently score this well, without having that, as I said, it's very impressive.
And it's not like they're massively relying on a tall forward. Like, yeah, Gunston is tall technically, but he's also not their
Yeah, he doesn't
tallest.
play that way.
He's not. He doesn't play super tall. He normally plays up the ground as more of a mid forward.
Yeah,
But yeah, like Hawthorn, very impressive.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, look, it's not any different from the Hawthorn side we've been seeing the last few weeks. They will tear worse team to shreds, which is absolutely amazing. When we again going back to the start of the season where we thought North were the more complete team, and
yeah,
looking
you
to
look at
win
it on
that like
paper,
round
and
four
the only thing that we could fault from North was their defense. Like their midfield had begun to vastly improve. Their forward line was fairly solid. And you can only fault their defense. Whereas when we looked at Hawthorn, it looked like they didn't really have a direction. There was
exactly looked incohesive. Where now it's gone from Hawthorn's found an identity to Hawthorn's one of the best
teams in the competition.
Stylistically, absolutely. So, it's time makes a fool of us all, Blazy.
I know.
As I said, after 2 weeks ago calling Brisbane the undoubted best team in the competition, they've dropped off. So, as I said, it just doesn't pay to make claims about football at the moment.
Don't worry. In our bye week, I am very much going to talk about our initial ladder placements for these teams and where we went wrong, because there is going to be a lot of interesting things to talk about.
Standouts, yeah.
Hawthorn being a big one, I will be honest.
Yeah, I said Hawthorn would bottom 4 locks. I said that I couldn't really tell which one would win the wooden spoon out of North, Hawthorn, and West Coast.
No one expected Richmond to be bottom Hawthorn.
4. No one expected that many injuries from them, to be fair. I think I had them 4th last. I don't know. We'll bring that up next week. No, the week after.
Week after.
Yeah. But, as I said, Richmond, the only thing we can really say about that game is that they did have like a patch of resistance, a bit in the second where they looked like they were going to get spanked by about 100, brought it back a bit, but other than that,
to our credit, I thought we did have some solid defensive efforts. Nick Vlauston always being a standout for that. There's a reason he was mentioned in the All Australian selections, even though he's not a definite for the top 40 or anything like that yet. Yeah. He finished with 24 touches at 91.7% efficiency, 8 intercepts, 10 marks, and 15 pressure acts. I believe he also had like 6 or 7 spoils as well. He was very, very good. Mid-season rookie Jacob Blight was back in the team, and he looked very good one-on-one. He finished with 11 1%ers and 12 touches at 75% efficiency, 4 intercepts, and 8 marks. Unfortunately, there were injuries to Hawthorn during this game. As I mentioned, Will Day subbed out very early with a collarbone issue, taken straight to hospital. Thankfully, it has been confirmed that it isn't a serious collarbone issue, but he likely will not play. He definitely won't play this week.
It just means surgery's off the cards, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he's just normal recovery sort of period. Hopefully should be back for finals, but that's not 100% confirmed just yet. And then Jack Scrimshaw dislocated his finger at some point in the game. He should be fine to play next week. They might just get it taped up and held together. That's normally what they do when it comes to fingers.
Yeah.
And
honestly,
overall,
I stub my toe when I'm out for longer.
Amen to that. But yeah, so overall, for Hawthorn, they're so close to a top 8 lock. They just need to dominate North Melbourne this week, and there's a fair chance they will do that convincingly. They don't entirely have to rely on other teams. They just need to win, essentially. And win convincingly, which should be pretty much fine for them to play finals.
I think even comfortably, because I don't think they're that much risk of losing.
No, they already have a fairly decent percentage, so it's just about winning, I believe, for the most part. We'll look at the ladder in a minute anyway.
Exactly.
And then for Richmond,
are you on go?
Not just yet. And then for Richmond, obviously, it's still in play. The wooden spoon could possibly get the first pick 1, as we talked about before. Still fighting North Melbourne for that. If North Melbourne lose the Hawks, which they probably will, all it takes is Richmond beating the Suns at the MCG, which we'll talk about that in a minute, to possibly not get pick 1. And North Melbourne will get another pick 1. Surprise, surprise. But we shall see where that happens. So we will move on to that in just a moment. Before we do, I want to talk about the MRO reports. We already touched on Dan Houston. Potential minimum of 4 matches he will miss for the strike against Isaac Rankin. Which means if Port get that top 4 spot and top 4 lock, and then make it all the way to the grand final, he could come back for the grand final. Likely won't happen. Oh, no, actually, he can't come back for the grand final in that case. But if they get that top 4 lock, but lose week 1, but still make it to the grand final, he can come back for the grand final, and that's about it. If he gets 5 weeks or more, he misses everything completely and won't come back till next season.
Yeah. And it could be the last game he plays for Port as well.
Potentially as well. So it's all up in the air at the moment with Dan Houston.
Such, not bittersweet, but it's hard, because again, he'll have one of the best seasons he's had in his career. But yeah, to finish it off so direly. It's a shame.
And then we didn't touch on this earlier. We talked about it prior to recording, but Lockie Ash will miss 1 match for rough conduct against Hayden Young. We looked at the tackle. It's fairly convincingly a 1-week suspension minimum, even though he's going to the tribunal to challenge it. Head hit the ground. There was no head protection from the way he did the tackle. It's pretty easy. 1 week gone.
Yeah, turning a player into the ground in a tackle, never that great.
Thankfully, there was no concussion or anything like that for Hayden Young. He was all good. It was just he hit his head via the chin, not like a direct head knock. So it was only just a free kick for him. But it was still a dangerous tackle and still had to be looked at. And I think 1 match is fair enough.
Yeah, I do have an update for you, Blazy.
What's up?
And this will make the showdown even uglier. Someone punched the Port Adelaide mascot and gave him a bloody nose.
Why would they do? Was it an Adelaide supporter? I would assume so.
You'd think so. It'd be weird if it was just a Port fan that really just hates. Yeah, he just hates electricity. Maybe his power's gotten shut out at his home. I want to take it out on it. I don't know. Look, as I said, it's funny because it's a mascot. But they're living people. Hopefully the cushioning of the bolt head gave him a bit of protection and wasn't too bad. But yeah, again, next week coming around will be the best to move on from that showdown.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. Before we jump over to ladder, I want to talk about the Coleman Medal because it's pretty much crowned as of right now because Jesse Hogan is 10 goals in front on
Hmm.
67 points. Charlie Curnow coming up second with 57. Ben King third with 54. Jake Waterman at 51. And Jeremy Cameron tied with Joe Danaher at 49. That pretty much rounds out top five. Um, Notable mentions to people lower than that is Harry Mackay at 46, Nick Larkey 46, Josh Tracy 45, Jamari Ugelhagen at 43, Bailey Fritsch 41, Darcy Fogarty 41, Kyle Langford 40, Jake Stringer 40, Tyson Stengel 40, Toby Green at 39, Will Hayward at 38, Mitch Georgiadis at 37, Joel Amati at 37, Jai Amos at 35, and Sam Darcy at 35. So overall, most
Um,
most players you kind of expect to be up there. Um, but I think definitely some surprising ones. Like Georgiadis has been in and out of the Port Adelaide side for most of the season with injury. There's
yeah,
fewer
exactly. I
kicks.
think he's only played 15 games, so very impressive all he's been able to do. Um, Again, Josh Tracy being the lead goal kicker would not be on anyone's radar at the start of the year
Mm.
for Fremantle, of
And
course.
same with Jake
So
Mortimer, of course, for West Coast, despite West Coast's very poor
yeah, yeah.
performances.
You would have thought it was Oscar Allen's year.
Allen
Getting
went out
back
with
as
injury.
captain.
Waterman stepped up when he needed to for the
Yep,
most part.
exactly.
But yeah,
Um,
congratulations. Pretty much, unless Hogan kicks nothing this week and Kerno comes in and kicks 10, or actually 11, I should say, which
yeah,
won't happen, but would be pretty impressive if it did.
you'd
Congratulations
have
to
to do it
Jesse
against Sam
Hogan
Wilkie.
for
Yeah,
winning
or
the
Jones.
yeah, pretty much congratulations to Jesse Hogan for winning the 2024 Common Medal. Um, but yeah, let's move on to the ladder. So we are looking at the end of round 23. The Sydney Swans sitting again comfortably on 64 points, but however, there's still a slim chance they could lose top position. However, it does require Port Adelaide to gain 14%, which probably isn't going to happen. As much as it would be
Nah,
nice for Port Adelaide fans, I'm sure.
there'll need to be like 400 points margin swing in both the Sydney and the Port game.
Yeah, and it's not going to happen. So Sydney pretty much consolidate the minor premiership here. Congratulations to them. Port Adelaide sitting second. However, they are tied with GWS at 60 points. So again, top two still isn't locked. Geelong is sitting at 56 as well. So again, they could also push up to top two. It's still very much all to play for in that regard. Brisbane sitting at 54. The Western Bulldogs, Hawthorn, and Carlton all jump back into the top eight, all on 52 points, making this race incredibly tight, as we've already discussed. Fremantle dropped down into ninth with that draw, pretty much hanging over their heads, sitting on 50 points. Collingwood, with their two draws, sitting on 48 points in 10th. Essendon moved down to 11th at 46. Melbourne jumped up to 44. However, their season is completely over. They have no way of getting into the top eight. St
So is
Kilda,
Essendon's as well.
yeah, pretty much. Their low percentage doesn't help them at all. Plus,
No,
they
because
have,
they're on 46.
and yeah, they highest
Collingwood
they
on
can go
48.
is ninth if they
Yeah,
win it all, but that's not going to happen. Or they could win, but they have to rely on other teams if they want to actually get ninth, which is it doesn't matter
yeah.
anyway.
No.
And then St Kilda and the Gold Coast Suns are 13th and 14th on 40 points. And then to finish out the bottom four is the Adelaide Crows, the West Coast Eagles, North Melbourne, and Richmond. And if you look at North Melbourne and Richmond, North Melbourne will likely lose to Hawthorn this week, which we're about to talk about. If Richmond can beat the Gold Coast Suns on the MCG and make up 3%, that last position could change. But we shall see where that goes. So let's jump over to the fixtures. Whoops, I'm still on the wrong one. There we go. Round 24, the final round of the season.
Yeah.
It's been a
Look,
long
a lot
season,
of
but
stuff.
we have made it.
Yeah. And it's going to be, I wouldn't say an interesting one to open, but it will at least confirm if the very unlikely situation of Collingwood making the eight happens. They would need to win by like 200 points. That's not going to happen. Melbourne's one of the best defensive teams in the competition. Um, and yeah, who's actually going to win this? It's anyone's guess. I don't think
I
Melbourne versus
I don't
defense
know,
versus Collingwood
honestly.
forward line. It's
Yeah.
like, that's a pretty good matchup for Melbourne. And, as I said, it depends on what happens to that midfield mix. Because, again, Melbourne lose another piece in that unit. So it's just, if Collingwood generate enough entries, don't leak too many bad turnovers, I'll say they should get it done. But yeah, it could be one of those dour contests, unfortunately. Which again, for Collingwood, is worse. I don't know how they would make a game plan to try and win by 200, but they'll be playing for pride. So
yeah, pretty much.
yeah.
I think, obviously, ideally, they want to play finals, but fate isn't in their hands. Apart from them having to win and win by a massive margin.
Yeah, well, the fate in their hands is winning by 200 points. So
yeah, true. I guess it is the only fate that they can really rely on, other than other teams losing.
Yeah, as I said. So they need to win by 200, and they need to have results go their way. But, it's two teams near each other in dead rubber standards. This is going to be an okay contest.
Pretty much. In terms of our tips, I am swaying Collingwood based on form alone. Honestly, granted, Melbourne's defense is like really good for a matchup against Collingwood, but I think their midfield structure is going to be better, especially with Melbourne losing Sparrow. That doesn't help them at all. And again, Clayton Oliver's had a very 50-50 season. There's no guarantee he's going to even.
No, I think it's confirmed on ice. He's not taking part.
Oh, true. Yeah, it's true. I forgot that he was having that injury, and just been taken out completely because he had a bunch of surgeries, didn't he? It was just completely taken out.
Yeah, I think he's gone in for surgery already. I'm not sure, but yeah, it is definitely.
Yeah. So Melbourne just doesn't have much of a midfield at all. Like Viney's their only sort of standout at this point in time. So I just give the edge over to Collingwood.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're tipping for money, tip Collingwood. As for me, like this week of tipping, really screwed me over in my work comp. I got four correct, and that was not very good.
Yeah, no, it's a bit like that. It's a part of the year where you try and go for a few ones to separate yourself, but you can often blow back at the same time.
Yeah. Speaking of blowback, Geelong and the West Coast Eagles. After the West Coast performance, it's just Geelong on a silver platter, especially in Geelong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. And it's almost, I won't say it's a shame that Geelong's percentage, like, it shouldn't factor in if they win because they're not going to make up the 5 or whatever percentage it takes. I guess it's feasibly possible. Haven't seen the math. But yeah, as I said,
well, they only have to make up 4% to jump GWS, which isn't out of the question, especially considering they should put up a massive margin against the Eagles.
Yeah, so basically, if you're a sadist, and want to at least watch a game with final implications, watch this one. But yeah, Geelong should be easily. It's just, yeah. Look, you don't want to put too much, because they did have 2 good performances weeks before. But yeah, in terms of matches up in areas, yeah, like I don't see West Coast defending Geelong's forward line if they're going to get enough entries in there, which their porous midfield should be able to give up for them.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Dustin Martin's farewell game, granted he isn't playing, at the MCG, Richmond v Gold Coast. Funnily enough, this is very funny that it's against Gold Coast, considering all the rumours that he was going up there.
It starts the end of the season as well. I think it was the opening match matchup.
Yep. I don't think it was the opening game. I think it was.
Sorry, opening round. I meant.
Actually, let me quickly go back to opening round whilst we're on the page. Yeah, it was not the game. It was the Brodie Grundy match between Sydney and Melbourne that opened the season.
Yeah, no, I meant opening round, not opening game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know where this game's going to go. Like, per track record,
it would be funny
Suns haven't been able to win away from home at all, except for the one game, like 2 weeks ago? Granted, that was a kick after the siren, so that it still could have been a loss for them.
Yeah.
For Richmond, this is just for pride. We want to end this season on a high note. We expected to kind of
Yeah.
get dominated by Hawthorn, considering their form, but the Suns have been a lot more patchy and a lot more inconsistent. We could jump them.
Mm.
Especially, I don't know what sort of players we're going to get back. I don't think it's really going to matter too much. But if we're able to shut down their midfield, which I think is entirely possible, we should get the upper hand overall.
And, as I said, Long and King are, both decent players, but, you get good match against those two. And Gold
I
Coast
think
forward
Ben
line cut
Miller
down a bit.
and Jacob Light should be able to take them pretty convincingly.
Yeah, so exactly. So
And plus, we've still got
yeah,
Vlosten and Broad down there as well. Bolter could rotate down there if he needs to.
look, yeah, as I said, maybe I'm sadistic in the fact that I do actually want the upset victory to happen. I know Gold Coast have done nothing in their club history to deserve more pain and misery, but it would just be funny.
It would be funny. Yeah, honestly, I don't know who you could tip for this. I think I'm actually going to tip Richmond for this one, just because I have hope for this last game of the season. However, again, the Suns could surprise you, considering they haven't been able to win away from home apart from 2 weeks ago. I don't know what their track record is on the MCG. I don't think it's very good at all, because they don't play that many games at all on the MCG. So this likely does swing very much in Richmond's favor, even though they're not favorites, just by simplicity's sake.
And look, as I said, Gold Coast did lose that match against North Melbourne on the final round of last year, famously to not give North Harley Reid. So yeah, if it happened back-to-back years, who knows?
Well, here's if Richmond don't win this game, they get the number 1 draft pick. It's and even if they do win this game, they have to still jump North by 3%, which I don't think is all that difficult, really. As long as unless the margin is super slim.
Yeah. But yeah, as I said, do you want to talk about Hawthorn North quickly? Because I said it.
Yeah, again, Hawthorn is a no-brainer, but being that it's in Tassie, specifically it's in Launceston, so it's not in Hobart where North usually play. Hawthorn love this ground. Like, this is apart from playing at the MCG, they are absolutely dominant in Launceston. So I could give them the win pretty convincingly, especially over North. However, I want to see something from North, like whether that's just a strong midfield game or Nick Larkey to kick another bag as he did last season. I just want to see something positive to go into the next preseason with.
And I guess it depends what the breeze is doing too, because normally there's like a what do you call it? A couple of wind advantage on a ground like that.
Yeah,
if it's blustering though,
the UTAS arena is pretty open.
Yeah, as I said though, if technically North want a blustering win though, because they'll want the score to be as low as possible artificially, because Hawthorn just generates so much movement. And the Kangas just don't have enough ammunition to do anything really to stop that, as far as I can see.
If this last round wasn't a Richmond home game, I would very much considering going to Hawthorn North just to experience what it's like. As much as I kind of also want to wait for Tassie to come in to go down to Tassie, I feel like a Hawthorn North game, like with decent stakes, would be really good to go to.
Yeah, maybe. But again, this is just alpha bottom 4.
Yeah, pretty much. So Hawthorn, very convincingly. By a big margin, I don't know. You'd expect it. But honestly, we don't know what could happen. North could show something. Who knows? Alright. Gabba time. Brisbane versus Essendon. This, you'd think Brisbane convincingly, but after how they performed against GWS, Essendon could show up with a surprise in their pocket, even though they're playing just for pride. But there are some teams that love to cause upsets, and like we've been talking about St Kilda causing upsets. There's a fair chance Essendon could do the same here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think it's gonna happen just because, again, and you look at it like the way teams like to set up, Essendon need like those extra inside 50s from clearance dominance. I don't think their midfield's rounded enough to control Brisbane's. So I think they'll be chasing tail for most of the match.
I do agree.
But do I think Essendon's completely out of it? No. Interestingly enough, like in terms of the other match that's going to go on the same night, like a top 4 prospect versus a very bottom team, I would actually give that the slight advantage of causing an upset, but I don't think Essendon's completely out of it. It's just, there could be a big score by Brisbane if they, if Essendon's defense, which has been a bit poor over the last few weeks, continues. Brisbane's the sort of team that will just pummel them.
Well, here's the thing: if Brisbane don't necessarily need a huge margin to jump into top 2. Oh, sorry, into top 4. They just need to win.
Well, they don't need the margin because it's a draw.
Well,
the top 4 prospects.
The top 4 prospects,
they
can only get 4th because they don't have the points to be able to get higher.
The only way margin affects is if Essendon, for some reason, thrash Brisbane, and again, Port get thrashed by Fremantle.
Well, anyway, sorry. I zoned out for a second. Brisbane can only get 4th because they don't have enough premiership points to get to top 2, as we've already discussed. But if Geelong don't win this week, which they probably should, but if they don't win this week, Brisbane can get that double chance from them. It's a very slim chance, but it's a possible chance. But then again, they're also contending with the Doggies, Hawthorn, and Carlton.
I think the biggest thing for Brisbane, and the most likely, because we'll know if Geelong's somehow lost to West Coast, it's more just confirming that they'll have a home final elimination at the Gabba, locked in, and a loss would be disastrous because if they have to go to the G,
if they lose, they have to travel because they won't stay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it'll go from like a very amazing run home to a disappointing fade out. So,
we'll probably be tipping Brisbane. But Essendon could completely surprise us. Who knows? Funnier things have happened.
Exactly.
All right. Now, speaking of that other game, as you mentioned, Sydney and Adelaide at the SCG, pretty much a repeat, except at an entirely different venue of last season's round 24.
Yes. Yeah. It's just definitely different circumstances as well, with Adelaide not trying their slim chances. Oh, sorry, no, they were ruled out. It was just sort of bittersweet for them with that behind controversy.
No, actually, I think if Adelaide won that game, they were playing finals. This game decided which of these two teams were playing finals, off the top of my head.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, different situation. Adelaide will be trying to play spoilers. Sydney will try and prove that they're back on track. Adelaide's defense could hold up well.
Oh no, never mind. You were correct. Sorry, ignore me. They could not play finals.
I think Sydney's defense will be tested out a lot. I know, obviously, Adelaide didn't score much in the showdown. I think Port's just swung a lot defensively since they've moved to Sava out of there. It's just a lot more balanced. I don't know if it'll be a shootout, but I think Adelaide will want to try and pip Sydney by outgunning them, really. And as Sydney have shown, you can do that early. They weren't great against Essendon in the first quarter, except, it was probably the only bit of the game where they were great defensively for Sydney. But honestly, tipping Sydney, but I would say it's a 60-40.
Yeah, I think Adelaide could definitely finish this season on a high note. Maybe not with a win, but definitely by making it close. And I think Adelaide's defense has very much improved. Is easily one of their best aspects, and could easily shut down Sydney's forwards. However, I also think Sydney's defense is fairly solid, but will definitely get tested very, very hard against the midfield to forward push that Adelaide have and have been very, very, very much improving on week by week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so bottom line, Sydney, but could be another surprise.
Yeah.
It's very rare that Sydney loses at the SCG, to be fair. I'd say very rare when it's
Yeah.
happened like 3 times this season.
Yeah, well, as I said, it was looking to be fairly rare by the bye point, but yeah.
All right, Sunday games.
All right, Super Sunday.
These all 3 of these games could genuinely go either way.
Yeah,
and
I'm glad that they've separated the time so you can watch them consecutively, because I think there'll be a fair few teams that will be watching all 3.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely
Giants.
I'm possibly going. This hasn't been confirmed yet. I want to double check with a friend who's a Giants supporter. But we could possibly be going to the Doggies Giants game in Ballarat. It's going to be cold as hell, but I want to see this game. I really, really do, because it's going to be super exciting. Because whoever wins this game, apart from factoring in Carlton and factoring in Hawthorn and Geelong, could decide top 4.
Yeah,
like,
it could,
because it's like. Granted, we'll touch on
it's the most impactful game,
but this is 100% the most impactful game. Absolutely.
It's one of the games where both teams are actually affected, where we've got a lot of one or the other games before that.
Because both teams want a home final. That's plain and simple.
Yeah.
Giants don't want to travel. If they stay third, they will have to travel to Adelaide to play Port. Doggies don't want to have to travel. Granted, even if they move up into top 4, they will have to travel. But if they get 5th or 6th, they will get a home final. Granted, I think they would prefer the double chance anyway. Every team would always prefer the double chance.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's the reality of it is that Port are really dangerous at the Adelaide Oval. Granted, they're absolutely beatable at the Adelaide Oval, as we've seen even this season alone.
They lost to Melbourne there.
But ideally, you want a home final. Doggies probably do want a home final. Granted, we don't know if that'll even be at Marvel Stadium. That would probably be at the MCG. But I think getting that double chance is 100% what they want.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of the matchup, as I said, it's like the Giants, they've got a defense that's holding together, which the Bulldogs do tend to struggle with. They obviously not the most accurate team ever, and they can leak off halfback. So if they don't convert, which could be the case, they might find some troubles. GWS, as I said, it's the tsunami, but it's often happened in waves.
I just did the maths. If Geelong beat West Coast by any margin, top 4 is locked.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't say top 4 is locked. The top 4 teams are locked, but what order they go in remains to be seen.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Doggies winning or not might not even matter. It might just.
I think it'll matter for the Bulldogs.
The highest they can get it will be 5th, pretty much.
Yeah.
So they'll get a home final regardless, I think, but they won't get that double chance.
Yeah. But yeah, on the flip side, the Giants, they can be wasteful on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's really just whatever happens. I don't know who I'll tip. Maybe the Giants, but
Ballarat
I would expect
is a crazy kind of stadium to
who knows,
to bet on.
And the GWS historically, there was one snow game that I've ever seen in my existence, and the GWS Giants hated that.
Yeah, so that was up in Canberra, to be fair, but
yeah, I don't know if they've gotten less cold resistant since then. So
I do not have an answer for you in that regard. This is very much a 50-50 game. Might even just straight up depend on ins and outs. Though I think both teams will go in fairly the same as what they have this week.
Yeah.
So.
Except Lucky Ash, obviously.
Oh yeah, of course.
Probably.
He shouldn't get off, but the MRO has done some weirder stuff.
Yeah.
All right, let's
So
jump
yeah, we'll leave
over.
that one up to you,
Yeah,
the pundit.
pretty much. Take your best shot.
Take it.
All right, let's jump over to
Carlton
Marvel
St Kilda.
Stadium for Carlton St Kilda. Absolute
Talking about ins and
banger of a
outs.
game.
Yeah. Who
Cut-
knew? Who knew that a late season Carlton vs St Kilda game would be?
this game could generally make or break Carlton. Again, like we've already talked about
Yeah,
it, they might not even make finals if they lose this, or if they win
exactly.
this, it's very very slim.
No, if they win that, they're sure.
Uh, no, because
Because
they
it's
still have to depend
Fremantle's.
on Hawthorn and the doggies as well, and Freo. Oh no, Freo. Sorry. If Carlton win, Freo doesn't matter. But it does
Yeah.
depend on Hawthorn and the doggies too. It does just depend. Oh
Uh,
no,
no, if they win, they're
I
in.
am silly. Yeah, you're right.
100%.
If they're in, they're in.
Yeah.
If they win, they're in. You are correct.
Yeah, it's just,
It'll depend on where they place. But based on St
yeah,
Kilda's current run of form, they could have a very solid matchup against Carlton. For Carlton, it will depend on who they
yeah,
get in. Because as we mentioned
exactly.
before, some players might come back, some might not, and that could be
Yeah.
a risk.
I don't think St Kilda will let Carlton muck around. I
No,
don't say muck
St
around.
Kilda love to play
Again,
spoiler as they did to Geelong.
well, I was going to say more just West Coast allowed those entries to just pile up a lot more. And, as I said, it allowed Carlton to find their feet in terms of generating score with their makeshift forward lines. So, yeah, if St Kilda can at least do averagely in stoppage work and the clearances, I would say that they're a chance to spoil. If that doesn't happen, I think Carlton will just strong arm them. And yeah, as I said, it's two back lines that, interestingly, Carlton aren't week in, week out good, but they can be.
Mm-hmm.
And St Kilda obviously are week in, week out good. So, yeah, might be a low scorer, might be a lot of pressure. And we'll see who Carlton get back for that one.
Strongest battle will definitely be off halfback for both teams, I think. Because like you can say it's going to be the midfield, but St Kilda's midfield isn't the greatest, whereas Carlton's midfield is incredible. So it's definitely like those halfback to pushing forward sort of battles that's gonna matter the most. I feel like those sort of transition turnover sort of styles.
Exactly.
So again, probably another coin flip tip. Take your best shot. We don't know just yet because again, it's all going to depend on who Carlton has in and out.
I'm still backing Carlton. I've put too much faith in them too.
Oh yeah, to be fair, I said earlier in this season I'm not backing St Kilda until they show me something, and they have shown me something.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, for sure.
We'll see where we go on that one. But if you're a general player, honestly, take your best shot at this one. If you want to wait for ins and outs, I recommend it, especially for Carlton. But this could very much be a coin flip game.
Yep.
And then the final game of the home and away season, the game that you will be attending, is Fremantle and Port Adelaide at Optus.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's with form, like pure win-loss, you would say Port. But, when you watch Fremantle play, they've taken it up to teams, high-quality teams. Again, tough run home. And with more arguably on the line for Fremantle, not arguably.
Definitely.
Obviously, they could technically be ruled out at this point. But, again, they just need that one loss to happen. And yeah, as I said, they'll be playing.
Yeah, pretty much.
If
the doggies lose or Carlton lose, they have a shot. As long as one of those two teams lose, Fremantle have a shot.
Or Hawthorn, but
Hawthorn less likely. But
lose. Yeah. Anyway, so obviously with Dan Houston out, Port have what do you call it? They have back half depth, but obviously the biggest draw for Houston is the most attacking of the halfbacks without actually moving forward. He just generates a lot of scoring involvements from his initial movements. So that's going to be sorely missed. As for Freo, they should get Josh Tracy back. Their forward line becomes a bit more potent. It's just how they'll need to generate some more off the ground if Port Adelaide's defense are to be as good as they have been the last few weeks, which they haven't been, unfortunately. So, yeah, as I said, I'll still edge towards Port Adelaide. Um, you know, it's still Freo at Freo, and Freo have had some great games this season, especially at home. Um, so yeah, um, honestly though, I still can't believe when we did the initial run home um podcast. Well, not that segment we did
A
when we
couple of
went
weeks
through
back when
the
we went through
last
the
five
run home.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 weeks ago to be exact. I
Correct.
said jokingly that Port were just going to win everything, book them in. And that has almost come true. It's like one of the few things I've said that have gone right since I've said it. So whether you want to take that as me being correct for the first time this year and tipping Port, or whether you think I'm an idiot and I'll get something wrong again, may influence your tips. But yeah, I'd probably still tip Port, but it'll be disappointing if Fremantle didn't put in a solid effort in this one.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think I'm gonna sway towards Port as well for this game. As much as you want to see Freo win on home turf, but just to try and make finals, I think
Mm,
Port will probably make it a pretty convincing win and just shut down
yeah.
Port's mids. Oh, not Port's mids, shut down Freo's mids.
Port's got down Port mids.
Oh,
Trust no one, not
they
even
do that on
yourself.
their own. To be fair,
Earlier in the season, yeah. It's
um,
been good last few
yeah,
weeks.
I think Freya's mids will pretty much just get shut down straight away, and Rosie and Butters will just walk all over them.
I wouldn't quite say that, but I would hope so.
Well, the only two that I think could really contest them is Sarong and Young. I mean Brayshaw could as well, but
Brayshaws good defensively, but
I
I
feel
think
like
it's the fact that you got Ollie Wines and Willem Drew to back them up.
yeah,
Port's midfield is very rounded. Um, as I said, it's more movement that's their problem. They have no problem winning contests and all that.
they
So,
just struggle to push the ball
um,
forward sometimes.
yeah, and occasionally defensively laps too. But you can say the same thing about Freo.
Mm.
Again, I meant from contest. When I say that,
Yeah. So
contest, stoppage.
unless there are very much surprising players coming out of Port Adelaide's 22 this week,
Yeah,
we both lean towards Port for this final matchup.
yeah, and Port might get Georgie or Marshall back this week, which will be good for them.
I did look at the list actually, and Marshall is possibly meant to come back, but I believe he's a test, so it's
Hmm,
not 100% certain.
yeah,
All right. Before we finish up, the Rising Star was announced, and to neither of our surprises, it is Cal Shadir,
Cal
as we
Shadir, one
as
of
we
the
both
best names
expected.
in the league.
He
Just yeah,
has been absolutely lively since coming in, and it is very much incredible the sort of adversity
yeah,
that he has overcome with his father, Paul Deere,
hmm,
who died from pancreatic cancer in 2022, just before he was drafted, which was very unlucky. And just to see him grow and to become such an important player of Hawthorn's forward line, even
hmm,
after not playing that many games, is absolutely incredible. And the fact that
yeah,
he's going to get to play, pretty much going to get to play finals this season too, right off the bat,
yeah.
easily one of the
You
best
are
feel good
not giving
stories.
North enough.
I want to give North credit, but
No, I'm joking.
Hawthorn are
I got no
amazing.
belief. Yeah,
Um, yeah,
um,
he kicked 3 goals against Richmond. I didn't mention that, but he did, and it's very very incredible. Just the stats overall that he has
yeah.
played and he has performed over this entire season.
Yeah, because as I said, he wasn't hitting the target in terms of accuracy at the start, but Hawthorn showed their faith in him and he's repaid massively. Um, Also, his work good to make some of his shots are from up closer where he can't miss. So, it's one way to kick accuracy. Make sure you kick from only about 5 meters out, but you work hard to make those opportunities. And Kashadia, he's got some smarts about him and is a pretty good mark. So hopefully, if next year his set shot is great,
Mhm.
yeah, as I said, him, Mitch Lewis, pretty good forward line.
Yeah, absolutely. And granted, with Mitch Lewis currently being out, that doesn't favor their entire forward line very well. But like him and Gunston and Dylan Moore and
Hmm.
Ginnivan and Chol, they've all formed such a formidable forward line, despite not entirely being all that consistent sometimes. They have other parts that fire, like they have a lot of players from their midfield that step up
They get a
when
lot of goals from their mids, yeah.
Yeah, but overall, like very very impressive season from Cal Shadir. I wouldn't be surprised if he's like actually quite high up in terms of Rising Star ranking. I don't think he'll win overall, just because he's of the low
Yeah,
amount of games he's played. But absolutely an impressive season and could only go up from here, and well deserving of
yeah,
the round 23 Rising Star nomination.
exactly. We might have a guess next week on who our prediction is, but yeah, as I said, he's definitely had a great back end of the season.
Absolutely. All right, I believe that does us for this week. It's been a long one. We apologize, but there was actually quite a lot to get through, surprisingly. Especially with it being the last round of the season coming up. Um,
Yeah,
Next week should hopefully be a little bit of a shorter episode. We'll just pretty much only run down round 24 and maybe a little bit of a hint as to what we're doing in the buy round, but I've already kind of dropped that we're going to go through our initial season predictions and then a breakdown of the elimination finals and slash the
mm,
qualifiers. Um, that'll be obviously like a small breakdown. Then obviously we'll do a bigger breakdown on the actual week of. So
yep.
until then, be sure to go check out our socials. Hit us up with anything as per normal. Check out my socials. I'm trying to stream 3 times a week, as I've mentioned prior. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, which is when these go up, and one day on the weekend. Sometimes Saturday, sometimes Sunday. Still, that's flexible. Um, and yeah, that pretty much does it for us. So thank you all so much, and we will see you all next week for the end of season wrap up. So, well, end of home and away season wrap up. So until
Mm.
then, we will love you and leave you. Catch you later.